that's the problem. Well, one of the problems I think with this movie, the movie is saying a lot that these two are meant to be together,
but I'm not feeling it.
but you don't feel anything. And poor Rachel McAdams, I love her so much. She can't act against a piece of plywood and make it a real relationship, and
She's
that's
Rachel
really,
McActing, but it's not.
it's just not hitting. It's not
Yeah.
hitting.
Welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show where we talk about fantasy films and the lore that inspired them. I'm Cullen.
And I'm Hannah, and I just realized we haven't talked about our theme music in a while.
We haven't. I realized because I just listened to the Back to the Future episode that I said Chicken Little was 30 years after Back to the Future, and it is only 20.
Wow, time.
Time,
Weird.
time,
Anyway,
time be a traveling. Today we're very excited. We have a very special guest. We have Frankie, one of the hosts of Shoot the Flick. Welcome.
Hi. So happy
Uh,
to be here.
yeah,
she,
thank you for being here.
she decided to be a very kind wife and not make her husband watch the movie. And you know what?
Yeah,
I think that's probably best for your marriage.
I figured it was, let me give him a break. I've made him watch a lot of cheesy romantic films on our show. So I was like, you know what? You can sit this one out. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a pass. Uh, See, because we're talking about the 2009 moving picture, The Time Traveler's Wife. It's a talkie.
It is a
It
Synchronized
is
for
sound.
sure.
the talkie, synchronized sound and music. Yes.
I was at a birthday party last night where we were watching Clueless, and when it ended, I mean, I love that movie, and I was just like, ah, these talkies, they're really hitting.
Wonderful. Did they think you were a time traveler back from like the 30s or 40s?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So
I say Clueless also is such a time capsule.
it's
Yeah.
like both a time capsule and it's timeless.
No, you're
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Emma is one of my favorite Jane Austens because everyone wants to be Elizabeth because she's
Right.
smart and funny and like kind of progressive. And Emma, kind of a relatable idiot. She's a
Yes.
DBU alum,
We love
just like
Emma.
me. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, this movie, Time Traveler's Wife from 2009. I haven't, this is my first time experiencing this content. Uh, I remember, so I was part of an independent film that this person at my church put on, and it called
Oh,
Leone, and it was filmed in this
Classic.
historical house. And the owner of the house, or one of the owners, Mrs. Jesmore, who was just kind of a sleigh of a person, she, I remember her reading this book. This was right around when the movie came out, like 2008, 2009. And that she was like drinking, like she had this really good coffee, or it smelled really good. It was like hazelnut coffee, and she had her little pug, and she'd be reading this book as we were filming, and like icon no notes. So I'm like, if she liked this book, it can't be that bad. And I remember the Carolina Liar song, Save Me, I'm Lost, as a background, was very popular and it was in this movie.
mm.
And the song has religious undertones to me, kind of like this movie, where like it's romantic, but you're like, the vibes religious. It's like
The vibes.
pre-Hosier Hosier.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's my experience until this past Thursday
Mhm.
with the time traveler's wife.
Yeah, I have seen this movie many times. I think I saw it probably right after it came out to like HBO or Stars or something when I was in, I guess it would have been ninth or 10th grade. But I also read the book in high school, and I've also read the book twice as an adult. I actually did not rewatch the whole movie for this episode because we just watched it. I did actually make my boyfriend watch it late last year because I had finished reading the book again. So yeah, I have seen this movie a lot, read the book quite a few times. So yeah.
Yeah, I've also read it multiple times as a younger, like teenager and as an adult. I didn't reread it for this just because I didn't have the time. But I remember
It's a big
loving
book.
it. But I've only seen the movie once before because I saw it probably around the time it came out, which if it was 09, 2010, and it was like around when I was graduating high school. And I remember hating it. So when y'all came to me and was like, "You want to do Time Traveler's Wife?" I was like, "Well, yes and no, because I don't want to watch this movie again, but I will." And I did. I hated
We
it
appreciate
less.
it.
I know I do a lot for my art. I hated it less the second time, but I still didn't really like it.
So this moving picture was based on the 2003 book of the same name by Audrey Niffenegger. Should have
It's a
looked up how
it's
to
a
say
it's
it.
a mouthful of a name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was kind of inspired by bad relationships she had
Mm.
had. And the author said she had no intention. I wrote in my notes of reading the book, which is hilarious, but I meant of watching the movie. She was like, whatever,
I I saw that note. I was like, wow, she was like, either she was like, I just don't want to read my own writing, or she's like, I am horrified at what I created. But it
yeah,
makes more
God.
sense that she doesn't want to watch the movie. I'm curious what she would have thought about the series. I can't imagine well, the one season I think had 6 episodes.
I never even watched that. I heard it was bad, and I was like, I don't want to even go down that road.
I can't imagine this story being so spread out. Like there's some, like I mean, we know I'm kind of a Game of Thrones hater, but I could get why would see that book and be like, that's a show, not a movie. And
Hmm.
then
Mhm.
this story to me, I'm like, how could you make a show?
Yeah, we don't
You,
need to stretch it out.
No, I
yeah,
mean you could. There's definitely stuff in the book you could, but I'm like, I think they got the stuff that the story needs to tell the story in a movie. Like
yeah.
you don't need to, drag it out. Also, what's his name who played Henry in the series, who was the love interest in the Divergent series?
Yeah, he's that guy. I can't remember
His
his name.
wig in that series, I saw a picture of it today and I was
I
like,
saw it too, and
oh,
I was like, it looks
wig.
There's some great discourse about wigs are looking worse because to make a really good wig is like a expensive art and people just don't want to pay people to make
yeah.
it. So speaking of the Divergent series, this
I
movie
know I
was
saw that.
directed by Robert Schwetke, who directed some of the Divergent movies, and the screenplay by Bruce Joel Rubin, who wrote the Ghost screenplay.
Like the Patrick Swayze movie?
Yeah, I'm like
Okay.
maybe a future Supernatural Romance Month
That was on
installment.
my list. Yeah.
Be fun.
Um, and it starred Rachel McAdams as Claire, Eric Bana as Henry, Arliss Howard as Richard, the dad, Ron Livingston as Gomez, Stephen Tobolowsky as Dr. Kendrick, Michelle Nolden as Annette, Jane McLean as Charisse, and Haley as Alba. Haley McCann
I was like, wow,
as
you're on
Alba.
first
Yeah, I was
name
gonna
My
say,
terms.
are
BFF.
we
Yeah. It was not a critical, but it was a box office success. The budget was 39 million and it made 101.3 million.
The critical review, I think it's something like 31 critical, and then even audience is like maybe 50%. And I was like, wow. I I I guess I imagined that more moms would really come out for this movie and like enjoy it, but I guess not.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of surprising to me.
Hmm.
I do remember it not making much of a cultural splash, though.
Yeah, for
yeah, no
sure.
one talks about it ever. I feel like
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're the first podcast to ever talk about it.
Yeah, don't look that up, but
Uh,
it's true. Yeah.
there's a lot of romantic cheese and like, not necessarily like smut, but like romantic smut in that it's so overly cheesy, it's completely unbelievable. This falls very comfortably in that category, and for some reason, it just didn't hit. And
Mm,
I think we could pinpoint some of the reasons very
yeah.
easily, but we'll get there.
Yeah, no, I have my thoughts. So let's talk about lore. Let's talk about fate. We talked about the fates way back in episode 2, Black Cauldron. You're talking about three witches,
So long
fate.
ago.
So ancient Greek thought fate was a thing. And so there's also the philosophy of fatalism that refers to that events are fixed and unchangeable by human agency, by fate. So we cannot alter our own fate. We can't change our density. So there were the Stoics and Epicureans who debated between fate, like divine will versus free will. And you have concepts like the fates or the Norns of Norse mythology that wove your fate. You have the oracle that had prophecies that you couldn't escape. And this was different though from the goddess of fortune or luck, who was more of a chaotic energy.
Mm.
And so defying fate, trying to avoid your fate, made it happen. Like in Back to the Future, we talked about Oedipus. And like everything that happened in that story happened because they had the prophecy and abandoned him, so he didn't know who his family was. Or we've talked about Perseus, we've talked about Percy Jackson. The grandpa locked his Perseus's mom, Danae, in the tower, which is how she met Zeus. And by throwing her and her baby into the ocean to die, again, Perseus doesn't know who his grandpa is, grows up to kill him accidentally. Achilles, he's gonna be greater than his father, so they marry Thetis off to a normie, and then she tries to avoid his fate by dipping him in the Styx, but she holds on to the heel and it gets stabbed. And
She should have just turned him over and dipped him in the other
Yeah.
yeah,
hand.
yeah, like
God, it's
like
so
dying an
annoying.
Easter egg.
Exact. That's the perfect example. Dying an Easter egg. Yes, you're gonna get stuff on
You
your
have to
finger.
have the
You know
little like
what?
plastic thing that that
It'll all
no one
get
knows what it's
covered.
called, but it's a thing, and you hold.
It's the thing.
The
Yeah.
It's the
thing.
thingy,
She needed the
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 thingy.
dreaded
gizmo,
thingy.
the gadget.
Yeah, gadget gizmos aplenty. You have Paris, also from the Trojan War. Paris Hilton, no, but just
Famously.
Paris, who was sent away because like he's going to ruin Troy, and then because he was a random shepherd, that's who he ends up doing the judgment of Paris and starting the Trojan War and ruining Troy. Macbeth, they're like, oh, they give these prophecies, and he tries to avoid them, and they all come true. Sleeping Beauty, right? A fate, a prophecy. They do all this stuff to avoid it. That just makes it happen. So you can't escape your fate, and then in Cupid and Psyche, way back when we talked about Beauty and the Beast, like by embracing her fate, like, oh, she's gonna marry a monster, she ends up marrying like the hot god of love and like having a better future. So it's like you have to accept your fate was kind of a big concept in the Greco-Roman world, but also storytelling and in philosophy. So there's determinism, which is different from fate because fate implies like a divine will. Determinism is more causal, but basically all the events in the universe, including human decisions, are causally inevitable. So everything is just because of like butterfly effect from the Big Bang, it's just going to keep happening. There's a great song in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, the TV show, Nothing Is Ever Anyone's Fault, that like basically we all have trauma, so whatever we do, it's not our fault.
I thought
There's
you were
a
gonna say the theme song for The Big Bang Theory.
the Big Bang Theory. It all started with the Big Bang. But they also sang with the Big Bang in in the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend song. Like we're all messed up by Adam and Eve, we're messed up by God, who is messed up by the Big Bang. Uh, so it's basically we could never have done anything than what we have done. So no free will. And then there's indeterminism, which is like everything happens by chance, which is because supported to some extent by quantum mechanics, because things are on principle unpredictable. Um, and people who support this are sometimes called libertarians, but that is not the political libertarian. Uh, there's a lot of debate. I like went down a rabbit hole of philosophy, and I'm like, let me just touch on what we need. And so I also went down a rabbit hole around predestination, which is the Christian doctrine that God knows everything, so everything's according to a plan of divine providence. But why do bad things happen? IDK my BFF Jill, kind of. So this I associated with Calvinism, but it goes back to the origins of Christianity. Some people like Saint Irenaeus were like, no, free will, but Saint Augustine of Hippo was a big predestination stan, and that kind of like cemented it because there's this other guy, Pelagius, who was like, everyone's good and I like free will. And Augustine was like, I hate him. And Pelagius was like, your doctrines come from like your pre-Christian philosophy that said the flesh was bad. And so Augustine had him like canceled 3 times. Like it wasn't just there's a council where they were like, you're wrong. He had to be like, no, he needs to be like canceled and exiled. And then and Pelagian essentially became like,
Cancel culture strikes again.
Literally
yeah,
cancel culture all the way back then.
yeah, in the late Roman Empire. And it even becomes like Pelagian becomes like woke, like something people,
The late Roman Empire is woke,
yeah.
unfortunately.
So that they would just people would say if they didn't like something, be like, oh, it's so Pelagian. Because it was
Shut up.
yeah.
No, that is blowing my mind.
So it became like even though the Catholic Church declared it heresy, then in the Reformation, people would be like, the Catholic Church is so Pelagian.
Wow.
So
So woke.
What an insult.
what an insult. Which shout out to the Secret of Kells episode. Pelagius was Celtic, and so they're like he was stuffed with Irish porridge,
Yikes.
So his name was basically dragged through the mud, and our only records of Pelagius are like what his enemies wrote about him. But
He's
he was
living in their heads rent free, though.
yeah.
I mean, come on.
Come on. So he was a free will person, which is definitely still an aspect of mainstream Christianity. But there's also predestination because if God knows everything, then He knows how it's all going to turn out. And then Martin Luther, was an Augustinian, so Saint Augustine's philosophy was a big part of the Reformation. And so even though other people were like no predestination, like Saint Irenaeus, like Augustine, his doctrines really took on. And then John Calvin was the big, like when people say predestination, they were usually referring to John Calvin's teaching, which is technically double predestination. My brain kind of hurts, but he taught that like evil, sin, and damnation weren't just permitted by God, they were decreed by God. And so some people were meant to go to hell, like they were made to go to hell. And I didn't think anyone believed this when I was a naive high schooler. And then in college, in an Applebee's, I learned that people still did. So college
Your
can be culture
waiter
shock
straight
for
up said
everyone.
that to you.
Yeah.
He wrote it on the check, like
Yeah, it's like
just so you know that you deserve to go to hell.
You deserve
God
to.
said
or
it.
else you're destined for hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this leads to the idea of the elect versus the reprobates, which some people say was kind of like extrapolated on after Calvin died. But this idea that there are people who are good and virtuous and they're often wealthy, so kind of like prosperity gospel, and reprobates are sinners, therefore they're poor. The Puritans, the Pilgrims, they were big stands of this ideology, and that has a huge influence on American culture and politics today. But this all is basically like, as Drake would say, God's plan. You know, like the idea that it's all like preordained, there is a path, and yes, we have free will, but everything happens for a reason. Like it's all kind of like one unified story. And so the degree, like much like gender is a spectrum, there's like a degree of like how much of a free will are you, how much of a predestination are you, and people will fall on all kinds of levels within Christianity and even outside of Christianity. We talk about astrology girlies all the time. And that could vary between how much is your free will, how much is Mercury in retrograde. So that's a big fatalism, determinism. It affects our lives today, and that's what this movie made me think of. So that Hannah, what's some of your research for the lore of this? In addition to having read the book like 27 times.
So a lot of this is going to be sort of revisiting ideas that we framed in the context of Back to the Future and also in Kate and Leopold. But this is going to be a little bit different because we're not talking like science. We are really just talking philosophy more,
Philosophy. This is our
because
philosophy episode. Yeah.
the science, well, I think the next one will also be more philosophy too, because there's no time machine in the sense. There's no wormholes. Like we're not really talking about that because Henry is sort of himself the time machine,
Yeah.
right? Because it's sort of like a condition. So one thing we talked about before was eternalism. So that the past and future exist in a real physical sense, like the present moment. There are places you can actually visit. This movie operates within that logic that like Henry can go back and forth from the past to the present, but he doesn't ever go to the future. We also talked a lot about the composability principle and the self-consistency principle. So basically that anything, so what happened in the past cannot be changed. So anything the time traveler does is limited to events that have already unfolded as they're supposed to. So like Henry going back like to change things, that's how he was supposed to do it anyway.
Yeah, like he can't save his mom because that's
Exactly.
written in the stars a million miles away.
And then anytime he tries to change it, that version of Henry was always supposed to do that thing to try to change it. That's just all
Yeah.
he can do.
Right.
Self-consistency principle is very similar to that. So like everything, it's just limited to anything he can do is limited to like what is actually supposed to happen. Kind of to jump off of Cullen's stuff, predestination paradox or the bootstrap paradox, a time traveler causes the events of their past. So it's sort of taking that one step further that like when he goes in the past, or when he travels, that is sort of like causing other things, the butterfly effect. So we'll talk about his mother's death and whether technically he
Mhm.
causes that because he travels. And also it's the idea that like no matter what he does to try to prevent certain incomes or outcomes, he just can't.
Yeah.
And then yeah,
Also his relationship with Claire, because I feel like in the book you don't really think about, maybe because their relationship is fleshed out more like just better in the book, but
yeah,
in the movie, because the old Henry is visiting the young Claire, so you think, oh, so like she really, when they have an argument later in the movie and she's like, I never really had a choice in this of being in this relationship, and you're like, yeah, she never really did, because this,
yeah,
older guy was kind of just being like, hello, you're my special friend, little girl. It's kind of weird when you say it like that, but it's what it was. And,
yeah,
and then it's like,
yeah. It's
that's
that question of like the chicken or the egg. Like,
right,
did
exactly.
their relationship actually occur, or are they only together because she fell in love with him as a child when he was
Right.
an adult? Like, and
It's
it's
the opposite of Back to the Future, right? Because in
Yes.
Back to the Future, you can go and you can alter time, and this, like, it's always going to have happened this way. And I guess that's the same as Kate and Leopold then.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if yeah, I mean we already talked about Kate and Leopold, but yeah, so it's sort of like we don't really know why they're in love
Especially in this
because
movie, because
especially yeah, because it's
yeah,
their
it's
relationship is very like not as fleshed out like you said.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, well I'll kind of bring up those principles throughout. And I have two other little items of sort of like additional research, just sort of like other perspectives on some of the time travel aspects of, especially of like Henry being the time machine. So yeah, well, let's get into this movie.
This movie. Okay. We
Cute.
open. We I'm scared. Mom,
Cute.
come pick me up. Well, his mom is driving in a car. It's Christmas time, and she's singing. And I'm that Vine. I'm like, Miss Keisha. Oh, she's fucking dead. Like,
It's like so obvious.
like she's
Yeah,
happy. She's nice. She's singing. It's winter. She's in a car. I'm like, this woman is.
it's
There's minutes to
Chicago and
live.
it's snowing.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
those are some icy roads.
Mm-mm.
And she's singing. I did some research on this song because I thought it was in the bleak midwinter, but it is no, it is Es ist den Ros it's Sprugen. Literally, a rose has sprung up. It is a Christmas carol and Marian hymn of German origin, commonly translated in English as "Lo, a rose ere blooming." Um, so it's a symbolic reference to the Virgin Mary. All references Old Testament prophecies like Isaiah. which people interpreted to be about Christ. It is popular in the Christmas season. Unknown author from before the 17th century. First appeared in print in 1599. Most commonly sung from a composition by Michael Praetorius in 1609. And it is a hit among the most annoying church organists, including my former nemesis. I have many former nemesi.
I've heard this. I love how you just casually drop in references to your many nemesis. It's just
Yeah,
Yeah.
I never really think that I do, and then I'm like, well, I guess the list is building, but
And the funny thing is that like Cullen's like the nicest person you'll ever meet. And so it's like, did these people know
you
that
just
you
have
were their
several
nemesis?
nemesis. It's like
so this was definitely one-sided. This was me. I
Uh-huh.
really don't think he knew who I was, or like, he was in his own zone. But I remember being an altar boy, and I would, if the priest wanted to do a reading for Saint So and So's day or whatever, and I would go up to do the reading, he would just drown me out because he wanted to sing a song. So he just cut me off to be like, dude,
Wow.
and so, and he always wanted to sing like the annoying Latin hymns that no one enjoys. Like none of the bangers, like always and it was like be songs like this, and I'd be like, it's 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, Uh, yeah. So
Liven it up a little bit.
yeah, that was that. And then when my friend, he was a choir teacher, and my friend, when I did my musical in high school, and she was the evil fairy, and she like screamed, he was like, "Why is she screaming? She's gonna ruin her voice."
Oh
And I
my
was
god.
like,
Uh,
Nemesis. Yeah, but really,
I
just a
feel
guy
like
who liked to
theater
do his work.
kids, I feel like that's a theater kid thing because I know that as being a
Yeah.
theater kid, you have a lot of nemesis that don't even know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, a lot of Mr. Schusters in your
Oh
life.
my god,
Come on, we can't go there.
You
girl.
can't go there. Yeah,
Uh,
if everything was ordained, did they think the Mr. Shoe Thong song cover was ordained? Preordained. Was there a world
Why
where
did
we
we
could
let
have
that
avoided
happen?
that?
or
Why did you think that was
acapellas,
okay?
acapellas, which kind of relates to this
Oh,
movie a little bit.
that
Yeah.
and the "Don't Stand So Close to Me" with Rachel. Why did
Ooh,
we okay that?
yikes.
Why did we let that go? Just
Mm-mm.
unchallenged.
Oh. So I guess like technically she probably would have died or been at least seriously injured, both of them, had he not traveled because she,
Yeah, they
she
swerved
swerved
before.
because there was a car oncoming. So she swerved out of the way, but she may have had some time to move out of the way from the other vehicle coming through, but not likely. So, but this does also like he literally is in the back seat. He disappears and she watches it, and then presumably, boom, um, she's dead. So this is that like, did he technically cause that, or would she have died anyway?
And because he appears to himself, so he flashes back to a few days earlier, appears back,
Mhm.
and then he goes back and is like, "You're time traveling. You can't stop it. I've tried."
Yeah, his like older self is
Yeah.
there.
So you can
Um,
touch and interact with your older self.
we'll talk about that. Because I have a crazy revelation for the person who has not read this book.
Ooh.
So yeah, you also have in here, why does he have to be naked? That I think that's sort of like it's very like depends on the movie, but like any sort of like displacement from a time or space or whatever, sometimes you keep your clothes, sometimes you don't. And so it's like this movie decides you don't keep your clothes, and
I think
that's
it makes
sort of it.
sense for the fact that it's like you said, like he himself is the time machine and it's supposed to be a
Hmm.
genetic thing. So it wouldn't make sense technically if
To
you
bring his clothes.
take your clothes with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um
it makes sense because it's like a scientific thing
mhm.
In big air quotes.
in big
Yeah.
air quotes. I guess maybe this is just, I think this movie is not fun. And so it has no fun
Yeah.
with, oh my gosh, you're appearing anywhere somewhere naked. I don't know. I'm like, you could do something fun and or sexy with it. And the movie spends a lot of time on him finding clothes, but does neither anything fun nor sexy. And then I
Yeah.
also have to live in a world where there's like a young girl later on. I mean, also it's upsetting that's a young boy, but like a very young girl who will appear places naked.
Yeah.
You don't really think that through.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
that's something I've thought about, especially when reading the book. I'm like, well, if she has the same condition, she's not bringing her clothes, and I think that's why it's like, oh well, why isn't there like a female version time traveler story? Like, because our next one is also the man time traveling.
Mm.
Um, but I think a lot of the book is not fun when it comes to the fact that he appears naked in places and
No.
needs to find clothes
Mm-mm.
because it's about survival. And I
Mhm.
think the movie translates that directly without doing anything fun with it. I think that's sort of just a symptom of the adaptation, is because like that's what the book is. It's like anytime he travels, he's in survival mode. Like
Yeah.
he has to, like he runs constantly, like multiple miles a day, so that he can keep up his endurance, so he can run away from, whoever he encounters, or, anyone that's trying to attack him or whatever. Um, so yeah,
So
that's
dour. Maybe that's why I thought of Calvinism.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, if they were doing this movie in like the style of Back to the Future, and you had like a Marty McFly type character popping up in random time periods naked, they would play that up like
yeah,
Michael J. Fox, like,
yeah.
oh God, and like running around trying to, that
Yeah.
like, I could just see him with like the newspaper in front of his junk, like trying to duck, and like they would play
yeah.
it for laughs, but yeah, they don't. There
This
are no
movie's
laughs here.
it's just a straight drama.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So something that's really interesting about him meeting his younger self, is in the book, his first traveling experience is actually he travels back in time to the Natural History Museum that he had visited, but it's after hours. And adult Henry is there and he gets him some clothes. Like he already has the clothes ready because
Mm.
he already knows like this is going to happen to me as a child. And so he gets him that, he has a snack, and they just walk around the museum by themselves and sort of talking. And he's explaining the situation that's happening and also gives him
Mm.
like, hey, so like you and your dad, like it's going to be really tense going forward. And, uh, he's sort of gently explaining the situation. And I think it's a really, really huge difference from this very chaotic moment that young Henry is experiencing. So that's just like an interesting difference from the book.
Yeah, this movie seemed to emphasize, like it mentioned that sometimes he's gone for days, but it seems to be like you're traveling for 4 minutes tops.
Yeah, and it's super random too.
Yes.
Um, so then the other thing I is sort of like some other research that I had. Physicist Dave Goldberg, he wrote an article for Slate actually right around the time the movie came out. Um, and he literally sort of lays out a series of like 4 or 5 time travel principles that he thinks that like sort of like those are ones you ascribe to. And one of them is actually there's no such thing as a multi-worlds interpretation, that you can
Mm.
only travel within your own universe. So my
Oh,
whole spiel in Back to the Future would be kaput,
multiverses. Yeah.
right? So
R.I.P. Cinderella 3. Yeah.
so that means like, he can't travel to he's not going to be in another universe where like the outcomes change. He's just stuck wherever he is. And like we said, he can't change anything. Another one of those principles is sort of like you don't really have a lot of free will if you are time traveling, because again, you're locked into what has happened is going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
So that's sort of really interesting. And then they do also say that the grandfather paradox is another one of those principles, but luckily we don't have to really talk about that one because that doesn't come up here. For those of you who don't remember or weren't here, grandfather paradox is, well, if you go into the past and kill your grandfather, you then, kill your parent and then thus kill yourself. So then you wouldn't be able to travel back in the past.
Yeah.
So that's like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. But we don't have to deal with that here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
See, much like the canceled Pelagius and Irenaeus before me, I'm a big free will stan. So this stuff,
Mm.
you know, I don't know. Not
Okay. Is there such a thing as, and this is again coming from what very little I remember about Methodist Christianity, is your name is written in the book of life, right? which is
Like the
like
movie
your
The Book of
entry.
Life with
No.
Channing
Oh god.
Tatum
Oh
and
yes.
episode
What
3.
didn't we decide like that's sort of what it was? But you like that is sort of like your ticket to heaven, that like if you like sort of like we already know you're going to be a good person, you're going to get in heaven, so your name is already there. So then technically, do you have free will? Do you have that in the Catholic Church?
I mean, yeah, it's a spectrum. There's people that
Yeah.
talk about the Book of Life and from Revelation. I
Yes.
guess I was always very much like, well, your choices affect the other people's choices. And so like your actions have an impact. So you need to be mindful of the impact. And the emphasis was like on it's not faith alone. You have to like do good deeds.
Right.
You know, it's like hard to get because like I also read so much Brothers Grimm as a kid that like that influenced my like theology of like you also have to be good because you don't want to be murdered by an evil fairy who's like, why are you such a rude little boy? Uh
Yeah, I only bring that up because I'm like, oh well, what about that? So you're someone who believes that the your name is written in the book of life in pencil, like a mechanical pencil, and they can keep
yeah.
erasing
Mechanical
it
pencil.
if you fuck up
Well,
and you're
I
like
mean,
really mean to
my
someone or you murder
baptism
someone.
was fake. Take a shot. I brought it up.
Yep, the lore,
The
Cullen's
lore,
lore.
lore of my canceled baptism. So it's like, was I in the book or not?
And we also
It's
mentioned that on Easter you were like, they triggered me by mentioning what was it?
baptism. Just
Baptism, and you're like,
literally,
I'm triggered.
yeah. So I mean that I was just always kind of like, oh well, it's everything is yet to be. I was very like free will. I didn't really think about the concept of like everything's preordained that much.
Yeah.
I was like, because I guess that wasn't a very good story. And that's kind of how I feel about this. I don't know. With everything's preordained, it's not a
Yeah,
fun
that's fair.
story because you like even if the maybe it's a happy ending, but like like we talked about in the Cinderella ones, like how Cinderella ends, but
Hmm.
a good Cinderella movie, it's exciting to see it get there.
Right.
Right.
Like I was just watching Legally Blonde with some like we put it on during work during lunch, and like we'll like split a movie over a few days, and it's like that courtroom scene. I'm like, I know she wins,
Absolutely.
but it's so and like you're like when she's struggling, you're like, "Ah," it's
Mhm.
a good, free will makes for good movies. That's my and if you're gonna do fate like an Oedipus thing, you have to if you know your fate, you have to be avoiding it.
Mm.
And it happens to you anyway because that's dramatic tension, like Macbeth,
Right.
You're not interested in reveling in the fact that like, oh, they're meant to be. If that's what
Yeah.
this movie is saying, you're like, that's not good to me.
That's the problem. Well, one of the problems I think with this movie, the movie is saying a lot that these two are meant to be together. They say it a lot,
But I'm not feeling it.
but you don't feel anything. And poor Rachel McAdams, I love her so much, but even
She's working.
can't
Yeah.
she can't act against a piece of plywood and make it a real relationship. And
She's
that's
Rachel
really
McActing, but it's not.
it's just not hitting. It's not
Yeah.
hitting.
Uh,
Because this is where she comes in, right? He's working in the library. He
Mm-hmm.
works, which is I wish we got more of because later I'm like, does he still work there? I don't know. So he works
oh,
at
the library is fascinating. In the book,
Yeah,
he
they
works
have
there his
more of
entire
it.
life.
Yeah.
And uh there's a spot in the library, sort of like in a stairwell, that is like a
yeah.
cage, and there's no way to get in or out. And
I remember
one
that.
of his fears throughout the book is like, I don't know why, but I have this intense fear of like, if I get stuck in there, I'm fucked. Like,
Yeah.
people at work have a suspicion that there's something going on with him,
Yeah.
but spoiler alert, he does eventually get stuck in the cage,
Oh my
and they
gosh.
find him, but everyone's sort of like understanding, I guess, but there's no way to get him out.
Because
So
to
he's
be
just stuck
fair,
there for like hours.
Yeah.
if I found someone who was naked, but they were like upset, they weren't like, look at me, they were like, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, criminal. I'd be like, are you okay?
Yeah,
Like what
yeah,
Like
yeah.
happened to
someone had
you?
an episode and is in distress. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Um, okay, so yeah, but we meet Rachel McAdams. When I first was doing the notes, I wrote Jennifer, and it's like, wait, her name's Claire. She was Rachel McAdams to me this whole time. And I wrote, she's Rachel McGinn to him. She's like, oh my gosh, it's you. Uh, it's giving Cinderella and Cinderella 3, which is like, hey, and he's like, who are
I don't.
you?
Who the hell are you, lady?
That's
But
a really good callback. Yeah.
and she's
That is
like,
true though.
we
Yeah.
know each other, and like you said, I need you to be chill about this, but like we know each
I'm
other.
not at all.
I'm
Sorry.
not. I'm not gonna be chill. Sorry. And he's like, I'm like, he's kind of judgy for someone who time travels, and I'm like, you time travel. Like, how weird could this be? Um. So, and she's like, because I was like, A, it's time travel, bro, like whatever, and then B, it's Rachel McAdams, and she came up and was
Yeah,
like,
what are you
wow,
complaining about?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like,
Literally, why are you mad?
I'm so into you. Can we go on a date? You know, like, yeah, say yes. So he does. He gets ready. I love how we have a really long shot of him putting on deodorant because I do love, I think about putting on deodorant a lot because it's such an awkward motion. And like in
Mhm.
logic, it would make more sense if you like had to put it on before your shirt, but then
Right.
it gets on your
Then
shirt.
you
Yep.
get the streaks. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but then it's like, so then it only works best if you're wearing like a tank top dress shirt situation.
Mm.
Um, and I think about this a lot. And so this
I
movie gave me another
see.
chance. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
really lingered on a shot of the deodorant to the point where I was like, is that on
The
purpose? But I
so
think it was supposed to be the
the
lipstick.
filmmakers also think about putting on deodorant a lot too. So
Yeah.
you guys have that in common.
Because I've had shirts that got kind of stretched because of like trying to.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah.
Um, so he time travels. Um, this makes me think of, did we ever have we any of us ever listened to the Bright Sessions? It was the audio drama
Mm-mm.
by Lauren Shippen, and she played someone. The Bright set Dr. Bright is like a therapist for people with special abilities, and one of the main characters, played by the creator, she time travels when she has a panic attack. And
Mm.
so, and she goes, all over the history of the world. It depends, like it varies, It's actually a very, like, it's a very good story, like the whole drama. And it like deals a lot with like the impact that has on her and like what she sees. And then she's trying to like learn and control her ability. But it's a much more clear, like you have a panic attack, you time travel,
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I check it out because it's some interesting time travel stuff. But they're on a date at his favorite diner.
Bow
And
tie.
bow
B O
tie.
W T H A
Mhm.
I. Tie
Yeah,
fit.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So clever.
And she's like, you're my best friend. I have a journal about it, like all the times you visited me, if you want to check it out. Um, and he's like weirded out. Uh, but he takes her home.
Yeah, he's not too
Yeah.
weirded out because he literally has
Yeah.
sex for the first night. So, which like do you, but like, you're not
I
that
mean,
weird.
it's Rachel McAdams.
It is Rachel
Yeah.
McAdams. I can't stress that enough. It's Rachel McAdams and Eric Bana, who any movie
Ugh.
I've ever seen him in is like the most boring individual. That's what pissed me off. I remember when I first saw this movie, I was like, why did we pick Eric Bana of all the
I
actors in
I
all?
love Eric Bana, but
Oh
I
my
do
gosh.
think that like he's
He's
not
one note the whole
great.
yeah, he's just
I think I just like looking at him because
that's
I'm
fair.
like, because I agree. I'm like, yeah, he's not giving. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Little quick side note about the book. Claire doesn't ever really date people in high school. Like she kind of like is saving herself for him.
Mhm.
I think so much so that like people think she's a lesbian, that stereotype.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and I can't remember if they've had sex in the past or not. I don't think that's
think
never established in the movie.
I
I think
think
they're like,
in the book they did like he drove her to a party or something and they all thought that he was
yes.
her boyfriend. I think that was it though.
Yeah.
in the book, I think I read something that said they had sex when he was 41 and she was 18.
Yeah. I think they do have sex in the
Oh,
middle.
I don't remember that. That's crazy.
Yeah. I was like, I
Yeah.
can't remember if that actually happened or if I was imagining it.
This
Um,
this this waiting
Right.
thing is very much giving Twilight. This movie actually gave me a lot of Twilight energy. Especially nickname my baby after the Loch Ness Monster energy. If you know, you know. And
Um, yeah.
yeah,
Also,
and also
there's
like that kind of chastity aspect too,
Right.
there's also a so she also gets sexually assaulted by this guy who's like hounding her in high school.
Yeah, and he like ties
And
him up in the woods.
they fucking torture him in the
Holy
woods.
shit, I forgot about that too.
And like she's so grateful for that. Like, I mean, I guess I can definitely understand that he
yeah.
Yeah.
is able to
Yeah.
stand up for her and like punish him and stuff. But it is so fucking crazy that I'm like, from the book to the movie, I'm like, oh yeah, that's not in this
That's
movie.
not in
That
that.
like
Yeah.
that's one of those like big moments where she's like, I love you. And that like he's like, you see a very violent side of him that he's actually very willing to do that because he loves her, or also because of the moral thing of like, don't assault people, whatever it is. But like he's like very violent in that scene. So it's just like a whole new side to Henry that you don't get in the
Yeah.
movie. So yeah.
Wow. Um, yeah, but they have sex. He has a messy apartment, and he's like, close your eyes, count to 1,000.
She's bad at
Uh,
counting. Good thing she went to
yeah,
school for art.
yeah.
Jesus.
And she like that after they have sex, she sees that he has lipstick
Mm.
and is very weird about it. I'm guessing
Yeah.
it was probably like Colleen Ballinger, Miranda Sings brand lipstick, and
Ew,
she's
oh
like,
my
"That's
god.
kind of
Like, oh,
cringe."
problematic.
Oh my gosh!
Problematic.
Imagine
Talking to
waiting for
children.
someone your whole
Not a
life,
Colleen.
and you're
Problematic.
like, "Oh my gosh, I waited my
Yeah.
whole life, and now you're problematic."
Oh no.
Um, well, that's also something that's really interesting in the book is that Claire's more so in the book than in the movie is learning that there are other sides to him that she never knew.
Right.
And one of them is that he fucked around a lot
Yes.
for her. And in fact, he was dating this woman, Ingrid, and they had a very
Mm.
toxic relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the damage that he did to her is what caused her death later on in the book.
Mm.
And I
That he
don't
witnesses,
remember,
right? He
yeah,
witnessed it, yeah.
I don't remember if it's an accidental overdose or if it's intentional. And I'm pretty sure it's
I thought
intentional.
she shot herself, didn't she?
Yeah, I couldn't remember because I know she'd had an overdose because she went to the hospital.
Yeah, I knew there was drugs involved, but I was trying to remember
But I
the full
think you're
mess.
right. I think she very violently took her life.
Oh my god!
Um,
And it's funny because in the movie they just blow it off like, oh, it ended forever ago. It's fine. But then,
it's
like, if you've read the book, you're like, no,
no,
yeah,
it's
not
not
ended
fine.
forever ago.
And I think it's so important for Henry, like for us to understand like who Henry is before her, because I think that like he's such a different person and like I don't necessarily think it's like, oh, she changed him, but it's definitely like he
Right.
was a different person and she's clearly imagining someone totally different. And so that causes friction in the relationship.
It's very
But
real in
yeah,
a way, but
Ingrid's
Yeah.
also
friend,
fuck.
this woman, Ingrid, her friend actually tries to warn Claire about how toxic Henry is. But she's like,
Yes.
doesn't want to listen. And then those two, Ingrid's friend and then Claire, actually kind of weirdly become friends, which is weird. But yeah, so Henry very different before Claire. That life is barely explored here in this
Yeah,
movie.
they kind of just paint him in the movie as kind of like, oh, Henry, that
It's like
little
a
scruffy ne'er-do-well. But it's
just
like,
a loner or something, and I'm like,
yeah,
no, this
and like
dude's
it's understandable, like, when he's at the diner or whatever, he puts booze in his coffee and he's, doesn't really have friends or anything. Like, and all
Yeah.
that's fine. And it all like on one side of it, I can understand why you don't want to necessarily put the super dark shit in this movie because it's supposed to be like a lovely romance.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would root for Henry even less.
Right.
Yeah. Be
But
like,
the
how
problem
many
is
women will you destroy, dear John?
right, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's like you have to if you're gonna take that shit out, then you have to replace it with something. You can't just
Give him nothing.
give him nothing and
Yeah.
expect everyone to just be like, oh, he's so pretty to look at. And look, it's Rachel McAdams. They're perfect for each other because they're both pretty. Like, that's not how chemistry works.
And it leaves some of that complication out of their relationship, which is one of the things I find so fascinating about the book.
Yes.
Is like their relationship is very layered and interesting.
Yeah, I think I would have liked him if he was a little more of a fuckboy in that, like, not, oh, I date a woman to the point where her mental health deteriorates, but to the point of like, oh, because he's time traveling, like he has trouble keeping a steady job. He just sleeps with people, like a lot of one night stands, which is much more like, oh, well, I get why you would be that way if you time
Right.
traveled, and how, as you get older, as you want to have a more serious relationship, you might want to change, but you still might be very self-centered, and I think if he was more charming and like smirky, I don't know, that could also go really bad. But it's like I could be like, oh, that's why she likes him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
That's when you
like,
change the casting from Eric Bana to
yeah,
somebody else.
yeah. I'm trying to think of who. My brain was like Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like 2000, like, late
Ryan
2000s
Reynolds.
heartthrobs and such.
You mean Ryan Gosling?
Yeah,
Or,
but they already
did
did
you
the
mean Ryan
Hellboy.
Reynolds?
Yeah.
Did you mean Deadpool?
I did mean
Deadpool we could
Deadpool.
do.
That's a different movie, but I mean, I would
That's
watch
a
it.
comedy. I'm making a comedy version. No,
You're like, I don't want this to be depressing.
The thing is, though, the story is very depressing, especially like later when we get, crazier with the consequences of the traveling and stuff. But just because it's a drama doesn't mean it can't be funny. When you have two people falling in love and like flirting and trying to figure each other out, that's rife for comedy. You can put comedy in there and not have it just be a bummer the whole time.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's like, I think it can be a bummer because there is a sadness to it that I do kind of like, but it leaned into too much like everything happens for a reason territory, and less of like, oh, this is, but it, like, the darkness is still there. They're just kind of like, but don't look at it, And so I'm like, I think either you got to be a goofy comedy or like a serious drama, but this kind of feel goody thing
Mm-hmm.
was very big at the time. But I don't know. My next note is, what if he disappeared mid-sex?
I don't know if that ever happens in the book. I actually did think about it when I saw that note. I don't remember if it does. I don't think so, because again, I think that would be too comedic.
That would be, that'd be funny.
Yeah. That's the Ryan Reynolds cut.
Yeah.
So they are meeting in the middle because now it's like they're dating, they're roughly around the same age. I was like, this is giving Benjamin Button.
I was just gonna say, there you go, Benjamin Button, meeting in the middle.
Which came out in 2008. So you can't really say this is like a full ripoff because the movie would have to be in development, but it was on trend.
Like you said, yeah.
But also the book came out like 7 years before that. I don't know when. I think Benjamin Button is also based on a book.
Yeah, short story.
Oh, short. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
we read it in Debbie's class. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I think it was like scripts like this were kind of oscillating around Hollywood,
Yeah.
He can't change the past, right? He can't go back and save his mom, but he's dating her. He's meeting his friends, or her friends, like Gomez and his pregnant girlfriend, Jane. Gomez, who, what does he do? I don't know.
Gomez is a bigger thing in the book.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That he gave, I was a big character in the book energy so much.
Oh, yeah. I talk about that
the
later.
surface with him.
And then
they kissed in the movie, but I was off totally.
Her name's Charisse, right?
Charisse,
not Jane.
Not Jane. I was like, she made such a little impact in this story. But later he reads her diary and she's like, you're reading my diary? And I'm like, didn't you offer him to read the diary earlier?
That's what I said too. I like rewound it because I was like, you literally said this is the diary I have of all the times you visited me, and then he's reading it later and she's like, it's private. I'm like, why?
Yeah. I imagine maybe it was like when she offered it, she would control what he was allowed to see.
To look at, yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
But it is weird. It's just like you can only look at it when I'm around.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
It's
want to
like,
watch.
yeah, not I want to watch.
But I mean, it is this whole thing where, because I think it exists solely because he's like, I can leave, and she's like, I want you to stay, because they're trying to be like, that's the whole thing. It's like he's always leaving and she's waiting and stay. There's a
Mhm.
lot of like on the nose. This is the theme:
Right.
impermanence, waiting.
Mhm.
Because as we talked about, he first meets her after he's already met her as an adult, but he meets her as a little girl. Which again, if we're putting this in the story, why is he naked? You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like, I'm like, if
that's
we're not
fair.
doing the goofy, silly comedy and we're doing meet child, do the clothes option.
Yeah, and that's not really resolved in the book. I think it's because there are more instances that he meets her in the book than there is in the movie. But there are instances where like she just always has clothes in the meadow for him, or in
Mhm.
the winter, she has clothes in their basement in this like small
Yes.
hideaway part, and he like stays there. Like he'll I think there's a way for him to get into the basement because he
Hmm.
always appears in the meadow. So in the winter, he goes in like by the boiler or something and hides down there, and she brings him food and books to read and stuff like that. Um, so I guess it is. It's sort of like this first time that it happens, it's like, oh, like he's literally sitting there with just like a blanket in the movie. I don't really remember exactly in the book. But like in the future, he's set up.
Yeah, he has the
But
clothes.
yeah, it's just
It's again, why couldn't she have at least been a teenager? I don't know. Maybe that's worse.
Yeah,
I don't
why do
know.
we have to like, I mean, it does like you could have maybe if you did it like once when you met her when she was a little girl one time,
right.
just to introduce that concept, and then later on she's old, little older, so maybe it's a little less weird. I don't know what it would have
Yeah.
like made it less weird.
I think like if he
Yeah.
met her once as a little girl and it was kind of like, oh, it's so cute to see
Yeah,
her,
it's
like
a cutesy
looking
thing.
at baby
Yeah.
picture vibes.
But then
Yes.
as we move forward, when he continually visits her, you can tell this little girl is becoming like obsessed with this grown man, and like, wow, I was hoping you'd be married to me. And it's like, okay, like I know we're trying to do,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
not making sense. And I remember when I read it, like the book, I don't know if it was because I was younger, it didn't bother me as much. Maybe it was just the way it was written, you know,
Yeah.
edged off the creepy vibe of it. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah. I
it
think
I
doesn't
it's
think
both.
translate well to film.
I, I think in Eric's
Yes.
defense, he doesn't give
Our close
creepy
personal friend, Eric
Eric
Bana.
Bana. He
Yes,
Yes,
doesn't
Eric
first
Bana
basis.
does a good job of
I,
like keeping it.
No, he
very
does.
innocent.
Yeah.
So
Nothing
like,
against him.
Yeah.
so it's not giving like a Lolita, like he's
No,
Right.
no, 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 no.
so it's like it's not supposed to be creepy, but to me, I'm like, is one of those choices where we're like, why did we put ourselves here?
Mhm.
And then the whole like, I don't know, because it's also, I remember, we're getting into more Cullen lore, but I remember being like 17 and I was like, it was doing the musical, and one of the cast members who was like 12, 11, like she had a little crush on me. And so I was always very careful in how I talked
Right.
to her. But
Mhm.
just like, cause she, I don't know, she'd ask me anything and I'd just be like, oh, thank you. Like just very like friendly, polite, it's like I was not alone with her or anything. It's not like she was trying to be alone. Like it was just like a little crush she had. But kind of my attitude towards it, even though I was also a child technically, but I was 17, right? Is that it's like, oh, I want this to be like a funny, embarrassing memory for her when she gets older.
Yes.
Like, oh, remember when I had
Yes.
this little crush? Not like, oh, I need to like use this to my advantage or wait
Mm.
for her someday, And
Yeah.
it's just like I get what they're doing with the, like, oh, I thought you'd be married to me. And like that could be cute. But I don't know. I think it's just
It's
like,
hard.
I think
I think in general the book is just really difficult to adapt.
yep.
A lot of
I
yeah,
reasons, but that's one of them, I think.
I think that you nailed it on the head with like it's multiple things. Like it's not going to translate well to film,
yeah,
especially in our current context of like the boundaries between in
Mhm.
relationships with the children and
Mhm.
like what that should actually look like. Um, the fact that like when we first read it, we were younger, and so like it didn't bother us as
Mhm.
much. Um, and I also just think that like we know in the book that his intent is
Isn't
not to
creepy.
seduce her.
Yeah.
Because he's
It's
already met her as an adult.
yes. And also he's in survival mode. He's not there to like do anything. Like
Yeah.
he's just like, okay, I guess like we're
Guess I'm
gonna
just here for a while.
hang out, I guess, you
Yeah.
know. But in the movie, that's harder to demonstrate that intent, that the intent is not to do
Yes.
anything bad. Yeah, it's just,
Yeah, it's like I didn't even get that intent, but it is like she points it out later where it's like she has such little control in her life. And
Mhm.
yeah.
like it's like fate did the grooming
If
for
she didn't
him.
meet
Yes.
him as a child and fall in love with him, as an adult, would she be like, this guy's
She
a
have
fuck boy.
even
I'm not even interested, you know?
correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and I also think it's like she, yeah, she just like she doesn't have really a choice, and we were in
Yeah.
this very like weird situation where like this will never ever happen because time travel is
Yeah.
not real. So we're literally
Wow.
creating a new morally gray potential relationship issue with like
Yeah. And
whether
I
it's grooming or not, because like it's
Yeah.
at the
And I
very
think
least morally gray.
in the book they do have chemistry together and you see more of their relationship and you understand like they actually do fall in love, so
They have stuff in
you let more
common.
shit go. Yeah. In this, like I was kind of saying before, there's no chemistry. So even
Mhm.
in any romantic movie, chemistry, even if it's a shit movie, it'll go a long way in a romance.
Yeah.
But also just in this, it's the movie's telling us a lot that they belong together.
Yeah.
But it's not really showing us why. So it seems more like she's trapped Rachel McAdams in this fake
Yeah.
prison that she's constructed, or that not even either of them have constructed, just fate itself has constructed around them. And they're just in
Yes.
love because.
Yeah, the
And
fact that there's
that's
nothing,
why, sorry, go ahead, Hannah.
they don't have anything in common in the
Yeah.
movie, but in the book, like they're both into the punk scene.
Yeah.
They both read the same types of books,
Mhm.
and like they have stuff in common. And in the movie, they don't give it that time.
This is why I've always been such a Fate hater, because Fate is now excusing this behavior instead of putting the onus on the characters or the human beings involved for moral responsibility for like what they're doing, because the story itself is depriving them of any agency in what's happening. And then yeah, it's like both narratively, and then if you try and apply that to any kind of real world thing, it's like I don't like it. I'm sorry. The fates fight
No.
me, you know.
Careful.
Careful, I know, but
Don't tempt fate.
don't know, the Oracle of Delphi isn't here anymore, you know.
Uh,
Uh okay, so this is all because he read or die. Okay, so he time travels a lot. He's being hate crimed because he's wearing gay clothing or like women's clothing.
Yeah.
And Gomez meets him and is like, you look older, you're fighting. And he's like, we're gonna be friends. Cause now you know and I'm gonna
It's
tell you
fine.
what I do. We're gonna be good friends. I wrote 90% of this movie is dressing, but they have no fun with it. Uh and I also this goes back to grad school. There's one of my favorite, as in least favorite tropes, is when they have homophobic villains, but no one in the movie is gay.
yeah.
Because I'm like, this is white liberal virtue signaling. It's always like, oh yeah, this
Yep.
homophobe. I'm like, but no one's actually gay. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. It's like you don't actually see the consequences behind like, ooh, some cartoon villain who's homophobic.
Yeah. The movie also brings the story into what would be present day when it comes out, because I think in the book it's set in the 90s.
Yeah.
So it's like
Mhm.
maybe that's one of their ways of like making it more contemporary, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is weird. That is not a great, yeah.
Uh, and so Gomez is like, don't marry him. He time travels. like, and he's like, don't
Yeah.
marry him.
Just
And
like that.
she's
And she's
like,
like, I knew already.
I
You're
know.
late to the party.
Yeah.
And he's like, still maybe, you
Yeah.
know,
In the
It's very
book,
obvious in the movie, though, like just from that part that he's into her, Gomez. Like Gomez
yeah.
is clearly into her, but it goes further in the book, as I'm sure Hannah will
It's
explain.
Oh yeah, it's a lot in the book. He's like straight up not only just in love with her, but basically for their entire lives. And they end up sleeping together while he's with Charisse when they're in college. Um, I also think that Gomez tries to hook up with her when they're married to their respective partners. And
jaw on the
uh
floor. Wow.
Mhm.
it's also implied that Charisse knows that Gomez
Sharif
is in
knows
love
the
with
deal.
Claire, and
Mhm.
she's like, I guess I'm gonna be here. So
Oh
it's
my
really sad
God.
and
So
fucked.
sad. It really
This
is
is
sad.
so, I mean, this is where like the author writing this because of her frustration with dating and relationships. I'm
Mhm.
like, this all tracks because this is bleak.
Yeah.
This is as bleak as those Puritans in a Nathaniel Hawthorne novel.
Oh, no.
Like this is so Claire sleeps with Gomez while he's dating her friend.
Yes.
So
While
she
they're in
doesn't have any
college.
friends. Her only friend is a time traveling maniac because she is trash.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
also,
she's not a good
Gomez
friend,
is
and
not a
he's a
good
bad
partner
boyfriend.
or friend
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
man
I
or
think
human.
he also makes out with her after Henry, spoiler alert, dies. I think, yeah. So he's like always just on her, like ready to pounce. And
Yeah.
Charisse is in the background, like, yeah, what am I gonna do? And it's
I
like, honey,
mean,
no.
I think that's the distance thing. If you feel like this friend is always going to be into you, you put some distance. And if that
Yes.
doesn't change things, the distance got to get bigger and bigger. And maybe it's a no contact thing. I don't know, but like if they're going to threaten your relationship,
Mhm.
you know, I don't not like you have to I don't want to throw everything away for your relationship, but if that relationship is important to you, you have to and you got to protect it. So, got to set some boundaries. And maybe
Yeah.
don't sleep with your best friend's boyfriend.
Icky.
I think there's like they not necessarily tries to like say that it's okay or anything, but the book does sort of like it kind of forgives Claire because I think Gomez is the only person she's ever had sex with other than Henry.
Hmm.
And
Mm,
I think she did it when they were in college, basically before she meets Henry in the present day, uh, because she's lonely and horny
yeah.
and doesn't have him. And so she kind of is taking advantage of the fact that Gomez likes her and so
Yeah.
sleeps with him. And
That's
so
very
it's sort of like,
human.
yeah. And so it's very complex and stuff, but like it's crazy.
So the book is definitely giving me like a very adult, like complex
Oh yeah.
story.
Well,
And
I also think that we don't, at least in the movie, I mean, they tone down Henry's flaws in the movie also,
Mhm.
but for Rachel McAdams, and maybe it's just because she's Rachel McAdams and she's perfect, but we really paint her as like the perfect woman with no flaws
Yep.
whatsoever, um, which doesn't really help with the boring aspect of it. Where like no one is
Yeah.
complex and no one has actual emotions. We're just going to tell you we have emotions.
The only thing that
yeah.
she does that's questionable is the fact that she has sex with younger Henry when she goes to pick him up after
Mhm.
older Henry, her present day
Yeah.
Henry, has gotten a vasectomy.
It's very
It's like
Bridgerton core. Yeah.
it's like very like, oh, that's really complex. That's the only like questionable thing she does in this movie, really. And I think it's like she has to be the perfect person, perfect wife to put up with this. Like I think that's what that movie is
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. I was also
So
kind of on her side with that because knowing that she wanted to have a baby, he went and got a vasectomy without telling
Yeah.
her. That was
Yeah.
kind of a dick move.
So at one point, he meets his mom on a subway, and he's super weird to her, and she takes it. She's also the perfect woman, so she's very sweet
yes.
about it. Like, oh well, I hope she'll hear me sing someday, and because he's like, I love your work. He's like, I love you, and she's like, what? And he's like, oh, I love
Yeah.
your work. It's
Mm-mm.
yeah.
No one on the subway acts like that when a stranger comes and talks to them. Nobody.
Nobody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lived in New
Singing is
York
our thing,
my whole
Christopher.
life. Not a thing.
Yeah. So then he goes to get the ring from his alcoholic dad because of course he's an alcoholic and
Mhm.
he sucks. And then at some point he just stops sucking. And then because he's like, I want the ring, you know, and he's like, you killed mom. He's like, I saw mom in the past. And he's like, I don't know. It's just like I took a leave of absence. I got fired. I'm just like, what is this plot that we
He it's so like completely boiled down to its barest bones from the book because like his dad basically like was like a somewhat famous or prolific violinist, and he was with the orchestra in Chicago and stuff, and they traveled around the world when they were younger. But the fact that like his dad is basically not eating, not taking care of himself, doesn't have money, and Henry is still trying to take care of him while also like time traveling and all this
Mhm.
stuff, and now like starting a new life. And so like it's way more complex and interesting. And yeah, like this dad sucks. Like he sucks in the book too, but it's like it's more interesting, and this is just like plopped in here. So
Yeah. Because then he just gives him the ring. He
mhm.
asks her to marry him. She says no, but then she's like, that was just to assert my free will. And
Can we,
I'm like,
Girl,
can we talk about how bad that scene was? First of all, he like slips the ring on her finger while she's asleep, and her ring finger just like naturally perks up, right?
that isn't that
And
how you
then
sleep, you
right,
know?
right, of course,
yeah.
naturally. And then they do and I don't know if this was like a trope or whatever, a trend or like a cliche in
Mm.
2009, but they even have her say, "Oh, 1,000 times yes." And as soon as I heard that, I wanted to shut the movie off. I was like, I'm gonna get out. Well, I can't,
I
but I
mean,
Yeah.
was a soldier and I kept going. But I was
thank you
just
for
so
your
annoyed.
service. Yeah.
I was just so annoyed. I'm like, oh my god, this is terrible.
Yeah, it's uber cheesy and not in a charming way.
No, it would be okay if it was like charming, but no, it's not because we don't know these people.
Yeah.
I don't know you. I don't care that you're getting married.
Rachel McNo, that's what I
So like,
say.
no.
Rachel Mc, um because then it's like he goes to her family, he meets her, you know, Republican parents, her dad's a hunter.
Oh my god! As soon as they had that scene where the dad was like, "Should take you out hunting sometime," I was like, "Oh right." I like remembered how he died. I was like, "Oh shit."
He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we should do that. And I was like, wouldn't you say no? Because if you had a gun and you disappeared, like, I don't even want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so talking about things that are really depressing, I forgot to even put it in here. But Claire's mom, it's a whole other deal in the book. She has very serious mental health conditions, and um,
Oh,
I'll just put it at that. Like it's
Yeah.
intense, and
is that why
so
they're gonna get divorced? And then he's like, don't worry, they don't get divorced.
And
But
then
yeah.
they should.
the little girl's like, maybe they should get divorced. And he's like, maybe. It's
Yeah, it's
like, oh, if we should be having this conversation with the kid, but okay, whatever.
yeah, the fact that he talks to her about it is like,
Kind of
yikes. Because
weird.
also like she's living through her mom's very serious mental illness.
Yeah.
And the fact that like she gets hospitalized at a couple points, she um like she tries to take her own life. Like it's a lot.
Damn.
And so like young Claire grows up with a lot. And again,
That
her
makes
family
her
seems somewhat
vulnerable.
perfect, except the fact that like they argue sometimes. So it's like again stripping away anything
Mhm.
that's complex
Hmm.
about her. But yeah, in the book, people in Claire's life sort of do still know a bit about Henry. So like Frankie mentioned, like they actually uh he takes her or drives her to like a high school party. She goes in and one of her friends kind of comes out and they meet. And then a few years later, like Henry's there with Claire and then this other person. And this lady clocks him. I actually think it's at their wedding that she clocks
Yeah.
him is like, I remember you. Um,
Fake their
Also when he first meets her parents and also her brother is there, there's also some shit with her brother too. Um, but he they kind of recognize him and they're like, we know you from somewhere.
Mhm.
But they're not like obvious to him about it. They don't say anything. Because what they know him from is they had shot someone in the middle of the night and watched this person disappear, and they're pretty sure it
Remember
was
that.
him.
I
And so
remember
like
that.
this guy is showing up at their house with their daughter, or with his daughter. So yeah,
Yikes.
it's pretty crazy. So
Yeah, but here it's time for a very 2000s
wedding.
wedding.
How can you say this movie isn't fun and funny? It's all condensed right here in this tiny sequence with
Because
the
they're
wedding.
getting ready and he disappears and then
Yeah.
he's ready and he swings
Oh,
back.
hijinks.
Yeah. Ron
Hijinks.
Livingston, I think he's selling this moment the best he can.
Mm-hmm.
Gomez, yeah.
Because I was like, why would you not elope? This is a
Yeah,
dumb idea. This is a
yeah, I
dumb.
mean, at this point, yeah,
Yeah.
like, oh, we established at this point that like we know he's triggered by stressful situations, and that's what causes him. So I would imagine,
And
like,
Yeah,
I want to
alcohol.
get married in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Because God
Um,
forbid he was out there in the ceremony and then it happened, like we'd have some issues on our hands.
wow, yeah,
yeah. I think it's just like, so he disappears right before the wedding, like his present day self
yeah.
that
Mhm.
she is supposed to marry, but instead she ends up marrying the older version. And so it's like she's marrying the ideal version of him, the one that she knew as a child that she fell in love
Yes.
with.
Uh,
But it's like win for her, quote unquote, but also
her parents are
he
like, he has
doesn't
gray hair.
he doesn't
Right.
ever experience that moment together with her of having gotten married in that moment, because like the present day version of him, he doesn't ever experience that until he's like 40
Until he's
something.
in his 40s, yeah.
Yeah,
And so it's like they go through their whole relationship of like, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 years, and he has never
said the
understood that
vows.
moment. Yeah, he has never understood that moment.
So
They don't have
wow,
that connection.
according to church logic, are they even married? Because he's never said the vows
I
yet.
mean, if Cullen could get unbaptized,
We can
this
yeah, we can get unmarried, I guess, or have like
Yeah,
exactly, they're not
a really
married.
long ceremony spanning over like 20 years or whatever.
Yeah,
yeah. Because I'm
really.
like Henry VIII tried to get rid of a wife for less. You know.
Yeah, there you go.
But
Uh,
also, I feel like, and this might be like just a very surface level thing, but it also kind of lends to another reason why this is a hard book to adapt. Henry doesn't look older in the wedding scene. He looks like he has scruff and like someone spray painted some gray in his hair.
yeah.
Just for men.
Yeah, it's a
The
very
just for
just
men
for
stuff.
men commercial for sure.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, it just doesn't look, you don't really see the gravity of it, I guess. And it's hard to make that again translate to film.
Again, I think they're trying to make the tragedy have feel good energy.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And so they later come back and they do the dance, and then they're going to the wedding night. And this is close to like, what if he disappeared during sex?
During
Because they're
sex.
bouncing
Yep.
on the bed, and then he disappears, and she's like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is gonna be a lot of waiting." And then it kind of shows them moving in together. They're living together, and he keeps disappearing, and she's tired. Like he comes back, and she's like, "I'm not just gonna sit here and wait for you. Like you missed Christmas and New Year's. I have to go do a show." That's actually really sad. And so he's like, okay, okay, how do I fix this? Money. So he is
Yes,
like,
Yes.
I
that
can't
Yep.
fixed everything.
I can't save my mom, but I can get the winning lottery numbers and give them to you.
Okay.
This is
So I don't think he actually changes anything. I think that this was supposed to happen because future
yeah,
him
true.
doesn't ever tell her like what their financial situation is.
Mm.
I think if we can stay with the logic of like nothing can
Everything else.
change,
Yeah.
this was supposed to happen. He was supposed to win the lottery for her by cheating.
Hmm.
Which I'm like, whatever, go ahead. Um, but yeah, it is like super fucked up as to why he does it. Um, so so from this NPR article I read, paradox-free time travel is theoretically possible, researchers say. So we talked about all those different things that like,
Yeah.
well, if you try to time travel, this thing is gonna, you know, fuck everything up and you can't actually
Hmm.
time travel. So basically, this article talks about that there could be ways that paradox-free time travel exists, and that's simply everything will happen. So they're meant to be rich because even if they didn't win the
Mm.
lottery, something else would happen. The timeline will always correct itself so that that thing happens. So basically like gets rid of all the paradoxes, and it's like, there you go. It's
It's
supposed to
very
happen.
sacred timeline from the MCU. Like no
Yeah.
matter what you do, the sacred timeline will win out.
Yeah. And so like I'm trying to think of like another example.
Oh,
Um
almost like in Spider-Verse too, like the canon event
Yes.
thing. You
yes,
can't mess with a canon
exactly.
event.
Because the timeline will always correct itself.
And if it
Um
can't, it implodes.
Right.
Supposedly. That's what that guy says. We have to wait till the next movie to really find out the tea.
Yeah. And I don't believe
I
him.
mean,
Don't trust
I
him.
don't I don't either. I don't trust Oscar Isaac in this movie specifically. I don't know him personally.
Unlike Eric Bana.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not yeah.
So the other thing is that like, okay, this timeline, right? If it's going to always autocorrect itself, if Claire is always supposed to marry him, even if she said no at that moment and like literally was like no, gives him the ring back, something will autocorrect so that she ends up saying yes,
See, and this
which is
gets into
scary.
things like consent and like all
Yes.
that. And I'm just like,
Yes. It's yeah.
Time travel taking away your consent.
fate taking away your consent.
Well, yes, but also
The three
time
fates aren't
travel.
girls. We're just
No.
No, they are not
I
girls.
think we knew that in Hercules.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
So
cutting Meg's life. So they're trying to have a baby. And it's leading to a lot of miscarriages.
This made me
she
really
wants a
sad.
she wants a baby so that she has a part of him
That's with
there with
her
her.
Right.
But also
in their
just to
beautiful
have
big ass house, which they now have. Yeah.
yes, with a beautiful thing in the back,
Mhm.
studio in the back. But also she wants to just have someone that is stable and will be there. And that's what makes the rest of it also very sad for
I
her.
mean, it's very sad. It's like, yes, is it kind of fucked up to bring a kid into the world for that reason? But people have brought kids into the world for a way more fucked up reason. So it's also
Yeah.
like, I get it's like she wants someone to love and to be with,
Yes.
who's not always leaving me.
But I mean, aside from this part that happens with all her miscarriages, the kid turns
The,
out to be a time traveler
oh
anyway.
my
Yeah.
God. Oh my God. So there's a lot of this is very violent. There's a lot of like
Yeah.
blood and like,
Yeah. And it's like that in the book too. It's pretty gnarly in the book also, from what I remember.
yeah. But I was like, are they ever really gonna fully deal with the trauma of this? And
I was
miscarriages
thinking that too.
they're
Well,
very common. They happen to most women. It's like, so I don't want to be like, like, so most people obviously know how to get through it, but it feels so like, oh no, another, I don't know. It didn't feel like it was
They
treated with a lot of
gloss over it.
respect.
They did.
Yeah.
it's also because spoilers for the end of our podcast episode, she's not the protagonist in this movie.
No.
Mm.
But that's
the
like,
thing.
there's blood in the bed. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And this has presumably happened multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And she just wants a baby so bad. So it's like, yeah, like there is a lot of trauma happening and they don't give a lot of time really to
they
like,
don't
or any
Rachel
time.
McCare,
They don't Rachel McCare.
I also don't, I didn't love the implication. I feel like, again, maybe I should have reread the book to see if it's like a similar vibe in the book. I don't love the implication that when she finally does get pregnant and it sticks, basically her cure for it is like, I just have to remain calm at all times and nothing bad will happen, as if that's
Right.
like the magical cure-all for miscarriages. Like all those other miscarriages that happen to you and any other woman out there, you were just chewing your head and too anxious, gotta chill out, and then the miscarriages happen. And it's like, that's kind of a
I wonder if
bad,
it's
weird message to send.
I wonder if that's more so linked to the fact that like they kind of are assuming that the baby is a time traveler.
Right.
And if they know that stress,
right.
yeah, I think it's maybe more linked to her situation. But I think the really interesting thing is the fact that the way that she gets pregnant and it sticks is because she has sex with a past version of Henry that is time traveling.
Yeah.
And it's like, now that's
I'm team Rachel for that. Sorry.
like that.
I don't care.
Yeah, obviously, but I'm also
she
like,
literally is like, I didn't cheat on you.
The science behind the cheat that I don't consider that cheating. It's the same guy, right?
Yeah.
But like the weird science of that is like
the science of it is
lying is like you have to have sex with the time traveler while he's time traveling in order to create a new time traveler.
Yeah.
So weird, but you know.
I also, in some ways, I love and I hate. I love like, okay, the woman wants a baby, the man doesn't. Like, it's kind of a stereotype. But if this is, I feel like the book is much more of a tragedy. So if it's kind of like like, yes, you'll want to make an honest man out of a fuck boy, but it's just gonna bring you pain. Like I kind of like it in that sense, but the movie's spin is supposed to be much more romantic.
I also think it's he doesn't want to pass on. He doesn't know that it's necessarily genetic yet, but he's
Yeah,
like, what if, like I don't want to
yeah.
pass this on.
And
So,
but at one point we see a child mysteriously watching,
and
you know,
smiling,
and smiling like an angel in a
who
Hallmark
looks
movie.
nothing like
Yeah.
either of them, but
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that, but like,
this
yeah.
precious blonde child in the middle of
Blonde and
Chicago looks nothing like either of them. Sure, it's their kid.
And so uh he is trying to find his doctor, and Rachel told him about this doctor. And so he
Dr.
finds
Kendrick, I think is
Kendrick,
his name.
who I just
Kendrick Lamar is in this movie.
Kendrick Lamar
sure.
because of Glee, I saw
You
him
know
and
him from Glee, I was gonna say.
I immediately thought of who is Josh Groban, Kill Yourself.
Yourself.
But I mean, Stephen Tobolowsky's been in a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
Many things,
Yeah. But he Clueless,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he is, right?
Oh
Right?
yeah.
Yeah. Is he the teacher? Am I mixing him up with somebody?
No.
I think
No,
you're
that
right.
was he in?
No, because isn't that the same guy as Princess Bride? Am I
Yeah, it's
mixing?
Wallace Shawn. I got
Yeah.
confused for a second.
Oh,
I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
yeah.
He's in so many things though.
He be
Yes.
working, yeah. But
Mhm.
so the doctor doesn't believe him, and then he disappears in a CAT scan. And so Derek
Mm.
can talk about, we think your fetus is time traveling.
I think that this is a great adaptation from the book because in the book, it's a little, I don't know. So basically, what happens is the doctor doesn't believe Henry at first. He's like, okay, fine. But what he does is he gives the doctor a note. And this
Mm.
doctor studies basically to find the DNA sequencing of the genetic sequencing of conditions like Down syndrome,
He's a
um,
geneticist. And
yeah, stuff like that. And so he gives him this note. He says, open this after your son is born. His son is born. He's
the boy.
distraught because, his son is born with Downs and they already know like what the struggles are going to be, especially if this is in like the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
And he opens the note that Henry, or maybe it was Claire that gave it to him. And it basically says the kid's name, birth date, all the details of him, and also says born with Down syndrome. And I think it's just kind of like a really weirdly twisted way to get the doctor on your side.
Yeah.
It's to be like,
Prove your point.
I knew your kid was gonna be born with Down syndrome, and like I didn't tell you before. It's like it's in the book, it's really weird. Like it's not really blackmail, but it is like it's a shocking thing.
Yeah, it's played for the shock of it, I think, in the book.
Yeah. So I think this is a good adaptation.
Yeah, it's better. It's fine.
So he's talking with the doctor, but he goes to a different doctor. He gets a vasectomy without telling her. And then time travels back to her at 18. She's like, what's wrong? We're fighting. You're going to be really mad at me.
Yeah,
And
he's telling teenage her about their future relationship issues. And
Marital
it's like,
squabbles, and it's
you
like,
shouldn't be doing this.
he grabs her
Grabs
and
her and
kind of
kisses her.
violently, aggressively kisses her.
And that's her first kiss and
And
their
that's her first kiss.
Yeah,
Horror. This is a
it's
horror
horrifying.
movie.
I feel like that scene was so much worse than the little girl scenes, even. Like that one was somehow worse. And I was
because
like, oh
she's like, that's our first kiss. And it's almost like you see her free will being overridden because if she knew that was their first kiss, and that's her first kiss as a human being,
I think
she'd be like, this isn't what I want.
First, and then she slaps him. And she's like holding her mouth, and she's like, she's like horrified by it. And also, I mean, I imagine like it's very complex. Like she's like, oh my God, he kissed me, but also it's like that wasn't right. That didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And also it's like if you know she kind of knows the context of like, oh, they're fighting in the future, but he is always yearning for the past version of her that isn't so weighed down by how he's complicating their relationship. And she's always yearning for the future version of him, where he's like older and more mature, quote unquote, like
Right.
what she imagined him being from the meadow. And so it's like they're completely on different planes of existence with their relationship. And so like this happening is like really, really fucking crazy and gross.
Yeah, it's giving like there's a like pray for your future husband, the kind of like soulmate, like that kind of
Yeah.
like because
Mm-hmm.
it's like whether she wants this or not, even though she's horrified by her first romantic encounter with him, she has to be with him.
Hmm.
And I hate that for her.
Yeah, and they try to dress it up at the end of the scene, kind of like what Cullen's been saying about like we're taking this tragedy and making it schmaltzy or trying to at least. And
Yeah.
they try to dress it up at the end by them having like a soft, like delicate kiss, and it's like, no, we're not saving
No.
it. You're making it worse.
Yeah.
It's why does God hate her? What did she do? That's my thing. It's like, why is this happening to her? She doesn't deserve
Wasn't she
this.
just in the movie version of like, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret."
Yes, she
She
was.
was.
Are you there, God? It's me, Rachel.
Rachel
Rachel
McAdams.
McAdams.
I mean,
Rachel McTortured in this movie.
Yeah.
hmm.
Uh, and so this is where so he goes back and he says, "Oh, I got the vasectomy. This is remember that time." And she's basically like, "You groomed me." Like she's like, "This is unfair. Like you came to a little girl and you put these ideas in her head, and now this is my life." And it's like, this,
She's not wrong, like at
yeah,
all.
like she's
Yeah.
and it's really sad. And so they're fighting, and this is when the Bridgerton moment of, he comes in from the past and she goes to meet him and has sex and he's like, yeah, let's get it on. And then
Mm-hmm.
she's like, I'm pregnant. I found a loophole. And even though
She did find a loophole.
it is like
Yeah, she does
it's
have a haha moment.
it's dubious in a way, but at the same time, it's like you're on her side because her life is being ruined by
It really
him
is kind of like, oh fuck you, I'm gonna do what I want, which is I was like, yay for her. I was
for
Yeah.
once in her
I was like,
life.
fuck this.
Yeah.
And like you could argue that like, oh, it's cheating because it's like a different version of him, but I'm
That's
also
not
like,
cheating.
Fuck that. No.
it's like it's the same person, and yes, it's like he might be betrayed by it, but I mean, I'm not like an eye for an eye person, but that's sort of like what you could read it as. Like,
Yeah.
well, she's like she wants a baby, or she wants connection at the very
Mhm.
least,
Yeah.
and she can get it with this version of Henry in this moment. So it's like, yeah,
I think it's in no way cheating, and it is kind of a good for her moment, like the good for her, where yes, like
She took charge of
ethically,
her own
yeah,
situation.
she did
yeah,
because that he's holding all the power, and she's
yes,
always sitting there waiting for him, and so for
Right.
once, she used his power to give her something, and it's this I saw this in like some discussion of the book is that it's like the book is almost a commentary on how in a marriage men are allowed to come and go but the woman's expected to be waiting,
yeah,
and so that's what I find kind of interesting is the time travel as an allegory for the gender dynamics.
hmm
And she wants a little joy out of this
I
hellscape.
I also think it's really interesting that like because she's been so perfect this entire time
Hmm.
that I think like this is our first moment where like, oh wow, she's interesting because she
Right.
does
Yeah.
something that's like kind
Exactly.
of questionable. You're like, oh, this is really complex. So like we finally get that like you go girl moment because we're like, okay, yeah, you be bad a little bit. Okay, I like this. This is interesting.
She defies the patriarchal forces of fate.
Yeah, she does.
Really does, yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's pregnant and she's like, we have to be calm, that whole thing. And then they get a flash of him dying in his 40s, you
She like
know.
appears in their
Yeah.
foyer.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then but later, he time travels to a zoo or a museum, but it's a zoo. And he meets his daughter. She's like, Dad, he learns that they have a daughter. She's perfect. She time travels. He dies when she's 5, which is the sad part, but she knows how to control her time traveling. And she has heard her grandma sing, and singing helps her control it. So in the first scene, he's talking about how he can't sing, he has a bad voice. And she's like, we love your voice. And, she's like, oh, I sing to control it. You could try that too. He's like, oh, I can't sing. And I'm like, he never tries to learn to better himself. He never fights fate. So this is where men truly can't do anything but eat hot chip and lie. Like she is doing all this to make this marriage work because she's fated into it. And he just takes the benefits of fate. He takes fate giving him Rachel McAdams on the silver platter, and he doesn't do anything to fight to make her life better. He's not necessarily trying to make it worse. I mean, he's worried about her being hurt by the miscarriages, but he can't do anything to, I guess the lottery thing. He makes her rich.
Because money fixes everything.
Yeah.
Which is, again, such a classic man thing.
Right. I guess what he's doing to help make it better is that he does go to the Dr. Kendrick, but that's not really explored in the movie, because in the book they are trying to figure it out, and he's mostly just like a guinea pig to be studied. Yeah. And so they're like, okay, you can take this medicine for seizures, which helps sort of, because they say like what happens when he does go is that it looks like a seizure is happening in his brain. So they give him seizure medication. He doesn't drink anymore. He tries to keep his anxiety down and stuff like that. But it is sort of like he's accepted that he's just like a lost cause, and that's not cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that little girl, his daughter Alba, like you said, named after the grandma in Jane the Virgin.
Yeah.
She does mention that, like, oh yeah, I saw you guys before I was born. You guys are arguing the street. So going back to that article by Dave Goldberg, he is talking about one of the time travel principles that he sort of ascribes to is that you can't visit any time before the time machine was built. So that means,
no time before the hot tub. Yeah.
Back to the Future, which is interesting, is I think technically they get away with it because that's the night he comes up with the flux capacitor. So that's why right. So he couldn't go back and see Jesus in the year 0000. But in this movie, right, Henry only goes within his timeline. He doesn't go before he was born or after he dies. They even say, like, we have never seen you after, such and such age range.
Yeah.
Alba, on the other hand, she can travel outside of when she was born, but it's sort of assumed that she doesn't travel outside of when Henry has been born, aka when the time machine was created. So yeah, so she can kind of, keep expanding as, if they keep expanding the bloodline, which is a really weird way to put it, but if they keep passing this gene down, technically does their ability to travel back and forth from their actual time, it kind of, gets wider for them. So her child could travel all the way back to when her grandfather Henry was a child. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I think this guy Dave Goldberg, he kind of has some interesting like I said, principles that he thinks that time travel would ascribe to. Would it be real? So yeah.
So he goes, she's pregnant, I keep thinking of publicity. I'm pregnant. What? And then so he comes by and it's like, I met her. We have a daughter. We name her
I do
Alba.
love this moment.
I do too.
There's something really sweet about that because they're like both excited, and he's actually excited for once about something.
I love an emotion. So yeah.
I love an emotion. A single emotion.
An emotion is nice because the whole time he's just waiting for something to go wrong. She's looking at a baby name book and he's like, I don't know. Her tummy's out to here, and he's like, I don't know if we should be doing that.
Which is
and
a
then
lot of people
and this stuff happens. Yeah.
Name their children who miscarry.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's just such a dick. I don't know. It's also this movie because of the fate. Like usually in a story, a character is undergoing an action to achieve an end goal. They want, and that is the plot. Cinderella wants to go to the ball. Marty wants his parents to get together so he can exist. And so they perform actions to make that happen. But because this is all just fate happening to us, like they don't be a doing a thing, you know, it
Yeah.
just be happening. And
Mhm.
it's giving like a Facebook post energy to me. Like this could have been a Facebook post. I don't know. Um,
Uh,
just like, you know, when there was only one set of footprints, that was me carrying you. I don't know. It has the same energy to me. But you're talking about because the daughter comes by, like Abba will come by and visit, and she tells herself about
yeah, her
the
younger
dad
self.
the dad dying.
There's she kind of says like, isn't that kind of magical to like be hanging out with yourself? Now I have to throw a wrench in this for you, Cullen and
Yeah.
Frankie. I don't remember if you remember from the book, but Henry interacts with himself, occasionally,
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
said, the young Henry, like the little
Mhm.
boy version. Um, but uh teenage Henry gets up to some shenanigans with
Mhm.
his teenage self. Two teens, like a couple weeks apart. Um, I'm supposed to taste this sauce.
Oh my gosh.
It tastes like
Yeah.
ketchup. It's good. Lyle's making dinner.
Keep that in the edit. Yeah.
um, Hannah's taste test corner. But yeah, so basically he kind of does like mutual masturbation with his teenage self. It's fucking crazy. And his dad catches him. So that's the thing that happens in the book.
You know what?
Um,
I'm
I'm
weirded out,
glad
but I'm
that's not
like
in the movie.
that a teenager would do that.
I didn't
Yeah,
remember that till you said it, and I was like, "Oh yeah."
yeah. But then
Yeah,
again, it
it's
is. It's like
Narcissus.
it's and he also says like he got caught. He like felt weird doing it, and then his dad caught him, and he was like, "We never did that again." But yeah,
Kind of gay
so
though.
a
Why?
a little
A
gay,
bit.
just a dash, little dash.
But like
Um,
A
self
bit. Yeah.
homo, like not homoerotic, but like I think there's a different word when it's like self, and then I guess narcissism, but like he's in love with himself.
autoerotic.
Yeah, autoerotic. And I
Sure.
think there are a lot of people that actually, you
Yeah.
know, are like that. They really only love themselves. That's why they only date people that look like themselves, you know, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Mickey Mouse, you know.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Presumably Goofy, but we don't know about his partner.
We
Who
would
is
Yeah.
probably
Max's
never know.
mom?
We'll never
Who
know.
Um,
is, yeah, I don't know. But Goofy also dates Clarabelle sometimes. So Goofy's a little more open-minded.
oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Um, so there is a lot of speculation about like you shouldn't meet your former self or your past version of yourself when you time travel. It's going to cause all these paradoxes.
Yeah.
That's not super a thing that they actually talk about in like the quantum mechanics, time travel, physics community. That's more of like a literature media thing. There's this really, fun little video by Second Thought on YouTube. It's a fun cow themed video
Hmm.
uh, where they talk about, and they do a really good job of boiling it down, even if I don't totally agree with the theories they're posing. But basically, about like what could happen when you meet your past self. They do sort of like these thought experiments. So they kind of say, well, if you traveled back to meet your past self, you would have already remembered that, like your future self would remember that. So then that
Mm.
means, okay, that couldn't have happened then. If you don't remember it, that event never occurred.
But you could be thinking about us, thinking about me the way it used to be, but it was only just a dream.
Sure.
Wow, what a callback that was.
My argument was more that like, okay, if you don't remember it, it's because your future self hasn't come back yet. Like they haven't figured it out. They're still working on it.
But is that
So you
linear?
haven't gotten to the point where like, so say it happens to me tomorrow, that my future self comes back in time to meet my tomorrow self. Well, of course,
Yeah.
I don't remember it now, but my tomorrow self will remember it because it happened, right? So just
Uh-huh.
maybe it's something that hasn't happened yet. Um,
Hmm.
I said my future self is still working on the flux capacitor.
Yeah.
Um, then the video also suggests that remembering your future self, remembering that you have met your future self, these like the remembering and also the event of it happening, they're mutually dependent on each other. Like both have to have occurred instantaneously Otherwise, one or the other couldn't occur. So basically, they say that like this suggests that you are sort of outside of the natural passage of time in a closed loop of time. That, you know, your past self, you would end up traveling back to remember that it happened. It's a whole complex thing. But yeah, they do a really good job of boiling it down. It's like a 15-minute video, but basically, like they say that like it can't happen, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe it just my person hasn't figured it out yet. So that's what I'm hoping for. And yeah, I wrote in here as a teen, Henry did some wild stuff and his father caught him. So yeah.
So hypothermia, he gets it, you know.
Randomly. So
He
As you do.
yeah,
he gets stuck somewhere in the cold. He
Uh-huh.
gets hypothermia. It leaves him wheelchair bound.
Yes.
And I could have sworn in the movie that they take his feet, but they didn't in the movie.
Yeah, I
It
think that's
just
just the
happened in the
book.
book. And I was like, oh, because they did a
Yeah.
dramatic turnaround in the movie in the wheelchair with him. And I thought it was to reveal that he had no feet. And I'm like, oh,
You know,
that's
he's
not what happened.
just in a wheelchair. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think it's just like he gets stuck without having any way to get clothes or anything to
Yeah.
stay warm, and it's the winter, Chicago, you know. Um, and so something that's really emphasized in the movie and the book is that if Henry can't run, he won't survive when he travels. Like it's going to be a lot harder for
Right.
him to survive when he travels.
Yeah.
Because he needs to find clothes. He needs to get away, you know, from being in public or whatever. Yeah.
So yeah, you know, as soon as it's her fifth birthday, and she knows that he's gonna die in
Poor
her fifth
Alba.
year. Poor Alba, what a
Which I feel like
melancholy child.
why wouldn't Henry at any point, or her mom too, why wouldn't
Yeah,
any of them have been like, listen, if you meet your younger self, don't tell her that. Don't tell her anything,
Right.
because it's because Henry has a big thing about it when he time travels. He's like, I can't tell you things. It'll
Mhm.
just, complicate stuff. But for whatever reason, this five, or not even five, she's older. It's like 9-year-old girl thinks that it's a good idea to tell a little 5-year-old, like, hey, your dad's gonna die soon.
well, she's just such like an angelic, precocious child, you know, so she can cope with the grief and the melancholy. I'm just like, this is when I was really also the fact that he isn't that even trying to be alive for his daughter isn't enough to get him to fight fate.
Right.
He just eat hot chip and lie, you know.
Yeah.
And so he flashes back to, you know, a time where it's snowing and there's fireworks, and he sees himself die, and he vanishes, leaving the handprint on the wall. Impermanence. Wow. So it's Christmas. They're singing the song, the a rose air blooming, you know. They couldn't get Celtic Woman though, but it gives Celtic Woman vibes. And it's Christmas. He says goodbye to Gomez and tells him first. So his plan is just to tell Gomez. And I'm like, you don't tell Rachel McAdams? And so
See, he's not in a marriage. He
no.
is the husband in this relationship. That's all it is. Like that's not his partner. That's his wife that waits at home for him.
And
Wow.
also
No communication.
he also reveals to her, because she asks him, why'd you invite all these people to our home to watch you die?
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't want you to be alone. And it's like, you could have asked her, what do you want? Like, do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want to have people in the house, or do you want it to just
Maybe
be us?
she
Like, what do
wanted
you
to be
want?
alone.
But
Like
That's
maybe
what I'm
he
saying. Like,
saw the people, so he knew they had to be there.
chicken the egg, you know?
yeah, no, I
Eternalism.
guess that makes sense, but still, it's like,
Yeah.
just like in the logic of like, you're gonna die, and
Yeah.
you don't have that conversation with your wife. Like, how are you? Because she's the one that's got to go on after this and raise
Yeah.
the kid. So you'd
She has to
think
plan your
you want to like
funeral.
prepare her as much as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he wasn't even going to tell her what little
No.
Alba said. He told little Alba, "Don't tell mom." And it's like, Why? Why not?
Yeah.
I hate
Why
that
would you want
secret
that?
thing because she's like, at one point she's like, I know your father, like you can tell me things, like she has to like coax it out of her because the dad is trying to keep it secret. And she doesn't Rachel McDeserve this. And you know,
Keep going with it. It's funnier every time.
and there she sees it. This is actually, when they kiss and the fireworks start going, this was the one point where it was like felt sad in a genuinely romantic way. Where it's
Yeah.
like, if this was a different couple, wow, I'd be crying. Like it's like they know it's coming and they like know they can't escape it. And if they had been trying to escape it and they couldn't this whole time, this would have hit. But they
It
only
would
just
have been more tragic. Yeah.
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 So he time travels, he gets shot by the Republican dad, in the snow, he comes back and he dies and they're shouting, "This is where I kept my mistyped note from Back to the Future about Biff. I'm applying it to him. He, in all caps, he should be jail." I think he belongs in jail. I mean Henry. The dad didn't shoot him on purpose, but I think Henry should be jail because he's been ruining this woman's life. And you see the handprint fade, wow, impermanence, but he's gonna come back one more time. And he sees his daughter, she's playing, she's like, "Oh look, Gomez and Charisse's kids." And something about, I'm like, do I hate kids in movies? I don't know. This girl annoys me. But I think it's just like when kids are written to be so like Facebook post energy kids, they're so wise and stuff. I'm like, kids are like, "Rah, dirty." And I like that about kids. They're
Yeah.
weird, they're unhinged.
We
Uh
like that energy.
yeah, have
Oh, but of
fun.
course you have to make this kid like a fucking prodigy that can like, be a concerto violinist at age 6 or whatever.
Yes.
You have to make her a
She's
genius.
also a time travel prodigy. I actually think the
Yes.
doctor calls her that, like, because she has learned to control it, like, for the most
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
But it's because she's like, okay, get they're like, she's like, go get mom. And he's like, she's like, sing so you stay. This man doesn't utter a
He
single
doesn't even
note.
try to do it.
She should have run to him with divorce papers.
I know
Put
I'm
up
widowed, but
my
here, I want a divorce in your timeline.
But I wrote, we'll do it one last time. We're like, Rachel McRuns to him, and she says, you know, "I've been waiting for you." And he's like, "I don't want you to keep waiting for me." I guess that's the Carolina Liar song, "Lord, I keep waiting for you." Because whenever they played that song with this movie, I was like, what? That's a weird combo. But he's like, "I don't want you to keep waiting for me." And it's like, she spent her whole goddamn life waiting for
Yeah, I
you.
mean, too late now.
Yeah,
And
now it's
now
like,
you
I'm
say,
setting you free. Now
Oh,
that
okay.
will no
Well, you're
longer
dead. What else are you
benefit.
supposed to do?
Yeah, like now
Like,
that it's no longer, you benefited from her waiting for you. And now you're like, you don't have to. And it's like, oh, so noble. It's like,
yeah.
yeah,
yeah. So apparently in the book, it ends where she's older when she
Yeah,
sees
she's like in
him.
her 80s and he visits her one last time.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so they kiss. I was like, if she runs and he vanishes right when she gets there, I'm screaming, crying, throwing up.
Rachel
But
McAdams is like the queen of like tragic love story movies. And like she's
Mm.
really good at running to guys and jumping in their arms and shit. She did it in Notebook and it was like an
yeah,
iconic moment. This it's like the most like you're supposed to be feeling all this romantic energy in this moment,
yeah,
running to see him one last time and you don't feel anything. And it's like so indicative of the whole
I
movie. You're
think,
just like, I want to feel things, but I
yeah,
feel nothing.
but I think like when I watched it like the first time and then like the most recent time, because I just read the book, like I still had like those feelings that I've had for a long time about the
yeah,
book. I felt it. But yeah, like talking about it, I'm like, I'm never going to be able to watch this movie again and like feel the same way, which is
Yeah.
good because it's like I have a very complicated relationship with it anyway. But like, yeah, it given everything we've talked about, like it completely loses meaning in that context. It's like she's being set free after all this time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric Bana.
Yeah. It's like an avocado. Thanks.
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 Yeah.
She's like, oh, your pile of clothes. Thanks.
Thanks.
I
You
have
don't
to
have to
clean
put
these
it
up
out in
and
the woods
wash them.
anymore.
Yeah, literally, because like he's not coming back.
Yeah. What if he
Uh,
like it's never covered in bird poop and leaves?
that's
I
a good
guess that's true.
that's a good question.
Yeah, the woods are famously outside. Yeah.
Yeah, not a squirrel, not
Famous.
any creature ever was like, look, a sock.
Yeah.
And was like
I
darting off with it.
I wonder. No, because he doesn't ever. I think there is a spot where he does tell her when he'll be back eventually, but yeah, otherwise she
Mhm.
just leaves clothes and stuff out there for him
You
Yeah.
know,
just in case he shows up. Yeah.
imagine a marriage where you couldn't even be like, "Hey, can you pick this up from the grocery store?" Because you don't even know. Like you can't even how do they have a
That's
kid?
80% of the texts I have to Lyle.
Like that how do they even have a kid? Because like even like we have a cat, not even a dog, but even to be like not like, "Oh, I'm doing something after work. Can you feed the cat today?"
Yeah.
Because my husband used to work nights. So, "Oh, could you feed the cat before you go to
You're
work?"
basically a single parent. Like she essentially is a single parent.
But
He
he's
has
still showing up, eating food, needing to be
not
dressed.
contributing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because in the movie, I don't think he's ever at work again. I think that like he basically just retires because they
Hmm.
got all that money. But in the movie or
Also,
in the
he's
book,
a oh
he does
gosh, what a
actually have a job.
nightmare.
So yeah, he is just showing up, not actually contributing.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
in
wish
fact,
she had
he's teaching Alba secret keeping. Like,
yeah.
and so like that's gonna make her relationship with her daughter harder because she needs to take care of her, so she needs to
Right.
know stuff.
I mean, under any circumstances, it's like parenting 101. Don't tell your child to lie to the other parent. That's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
101 stuff. But
Especially
especially
about
in this
something
situation.
serious.
Yeah.
Not
Like,
like,
oh, I
oh,
don't know.
don't tell your
Dad's gonna
mom that I
die.
let you have an extra scoop of ice cream. That's still like you can talk about how that's can like lead to more. But like,
Right.
whatever, like being silly goofy. But then it's like that's gonna like
So
that shit.
just the trauma of that knowledge in that little girl's head that she knows that her father's gonna die, and she also knows that her mom doesn't know.
And
And
she can't
she
can
can't talk about it with her.
The the
It's just
stress that he put on that little girl, the guilt and
yes,
that
yes.
responsibility to like I have to protect my mother.
Mm-mm. Nope.
yeah.
Like no.
Mm-mm.
That should not be put on a child. So,
No.
yeah. This is
Um, wow. Okay, so our vibes and aesthetic, I just
yeah.
wrote it's 2000s Christian mom core, you know, but
Sure.
this dynamic kind of reminds me of the movie Mother with Jennifer Lawrence, maybe because they're in a big house.
Just for
I
that
don't know.
reason
I don't
alone.
know. Something about it. Something about like some supernatural patriarchal entity destroying your life. You know?
Yeah, I can see that.
Wow.
Um, yeah, this movie it gives like wanting to be the Notebook because what this was a couple years
Yeah.
Yes.
after the Notebook, right?
And
Oh
Benjamin
my God.
Button and
Absolutely.
I'm not even gonna
It wants to be
Benjamin
every
Button,
Nicholas Sparks
no.
movie known to man.
Yes. I'm thinking
Yes.
specifically that because Benjamin Button, I think, is its own thing where
Hmm.
there's like some other interesting things happening there. I think this is trying to be the Notebook and Nicholas Sparks stuff, and it's not hitting. And I think
no.
it's because it's way more tragic than those
Yeah.
stories because it's like, I mean, we've dissected it basically to Henry's death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every step.
It's just, yeah, there's a lot going on.
I wrote, like who's our protagonist? Uh
It's Henry.
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 But do we root for him? I'd like to do what?
I
I
mean,
I like what
There's
you pose here. What is his goal? Is like
There's no plot. There's nothing happening. I can't keep doing this because now it's no longer funny, but I wrote in my notes, I said, there's no plot beside Rachel McTrauma. But it's,
Yeah, it's
he just, he's not doing it. Like, he's not trying to escape his fate. If you're going with a fatalist story, you can't
Yeah.
accept
It
your
would have helped a
fate.
lot if they were
yeah.
even just because it would have also helped their love story if they were working together to fight the tragic fate of what, and then if it ended up happening anyway, it either way it would have been better than just like
This would have been
Yeah.
a
what we got.
completely different story because like I think also in the book they operate sort of as separate entities that like they can never really get those moments overlapping as
Yeah.
much as they want to. But yeah, if they were actually working together to make the most of those moments,
Yeah.
but that doesn't happen, like that would be a completely different story. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's like what are we rooting for?
I think if he's supposed to be like a shitty boyfriend and husband, that makes sense. But then we
But
need
are you
to
rooting for that?
no, it's like I
Yeah,
don't know.
no.
It's just
Yeah.
they're not trying to because like Romeo and Juliet, because they could be star-crossed lovers. So Romeo and Juliet, I mean, they're
Yeah.
dummies, but they do something to try and be together, and it fails. And you that's the tragedy was that the
Right.
circumstances of their society forced them into kind of, like it didn't give them the opportunity to be themselves, to choose their own destinies, and
Mhm.
people died for it. Uh if it had been, if they like, because they're trying to escape the fate of like their families don't want them to be together. But here
Right.
it's just like, oh well, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, we
like,
could have had like a Romeo Juliet type vibe here, but
yeah,
it felt like honestly, at least in the movie, we're relying on the gimmick of time travel to get us through. Like we sanitize the love story and just make it this time traveling man and falls in love with this beautiful woman throughout time, and that's what the movie is, and we're supposed to fall for it, and it doesn't work
because
at
they
all.
they they don't even do like fun things with like historical events or the passage of time. Like,
I think
yeah,
it's like they because they're not working toward anything together.
Mm-hmm.
It again, they're just like separate entities in a supposedly in a relationship. Um yeah, so it doesn't there's like nothing they can do because it locks itself into like there's really nothing for them to do because he doesn't want to change. Like even if the doctor was introduced way sooner and it was like, okay, we're gonna try to find a cure for you. But
Mm-hmm.
instead, if they can't end up finding a cure, but they find a way through him so that Alba can live successfully, that sort of like changes it and it makes it like it's still tragic, but it's not like, oh my God, like a tragedy cycle just constantly.
yeah, because it's like a great portrait of a dysfunctional relationship. It's not a
Right.
romance. uh
And that maybe that's the other thing is that like maybe it's billing itself as a romance, but it's really not. It's like this is a fucked up relationship
I
just
love
as
that
a
because you
result.
compared it also to Twilight before. And it's like
yeah,
kind of similar to Twilight in that way. We're painting Bella and Edward like they're this perfect couple, but really,
And also I think it's similar to Twilight in that like there are abusive tendencies between this relationship,
yeah,
particularly with the man and the
yeah.
woman. Uh and so like
And it's normalized in favor of fate and love.
right.
yeah.
Jeez.
Um, because I was gonna ask, do we ship Henry and Claire? I'm kind of like, why does it always have to be weird? And so far in time travel, our time travel aspiration, I'm only rooting for Cinderella and Prince Charming in Cinderella 3. Because if they're like fated to be together, that whole movie is them fighting to be together. You know,
Yeah.
she's doing something about it. And in, but in Back to the Future, yes, I don't really like George and Lorraine. Like, I kind of wish Lorraine could do better, but we root for them because we want Marty to exist. And
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Marty is doing everything he can to get them together. So the fate of if they're written in the stars to be together, someone still has to make it happen.
I think I root for Henry and Claire to be in a different relationship. I want Henry to be a different person, and I want Claire to be treated as a whole person. Like
Yeah.
I think what I root for about them is like I want them to make it work. I want this time travel thing, like if that's what he has to do, that exists, but I want them to make the most together. I want them to still make a happy relationship.
Hmm.
But I'm wishing for something that's not going to happen. I'm wishing for the Titanic not to sink
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's basically
and for
what it is.
Jack to sink into the bottom of the ocean. I'm
even
hoping that that doesn't happen.
even Kate and Leopold, which has a similar kind of like it was always fated that they'd be together, there's still such an emphasis on Kate making that choice at the end,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know? And in this, there's like the end, the climax isn't a choice, like there's no choices.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Yeah.
choice is like the central aspect of a story, eat the apple or stay in the garden, take the shoe or go to Century City and find out what it means to be human, Barbie.
Yeah.
Like you have to make a
Yeah.
choice to have a story. And yeah. Um, do I was like usually ask, well, who do we think of what do we think of the antagonist? I'm like, who is it? Is it fate, God, Rachel McAdams because she wants something better from him?
Yeah, if he's the protagonist, technically is she his antagonist? Yeah.
Be considered the I mean, hmm, I don't
I
Actually,
know.
guess
he's
I
his
think the
own
writer is the
antagonist.
antagonist.
the writer is my
Actually,
antagonist.
because like literally,
He's Frankie's nemesis.
yeah, because this like, are there weird hiccups in the book or whatever that like make it, like we've been saying, kind of difficult to adapt? Sure, but if you're gonna do it because it is the thing to do, you have to adapt a book that's popular into a movie or a musical or a this or a that, whatever. If you're gonna do it, at least, you know, develop the two main characters so that they're whole people. Like
Mhm.
Hannah was saying, it's like, you know, at least in the movie, every Henry's not as much of an asshole as he is in the book, but the assholish parts of him are not delved into nearly enough. And then you have Rachel McAdams, who is just meant to be this perfect paragon of a woman that changes him. And it's like, there's nothing to like sink your teeth into there. Because also they have
Yeah.
chemistry, just physically, or, you don't believe them as a couple at all. They just seem like they're going through the motions the whole time.
Yeah, I think he's his own antagonist because I think Cullen,
Yeah.
you're the one who says like he doesn't do anything to better himself for her, for their daughter. And so it's like
Yeah.
he's making this worse for himself and his family.
Yeah. He just does things like cheat in the lottery, get a vasectomy without telling her, Um, because I guess, yeah, like to me, it's like if we're just exploring the theme, I was like, what is this movie trying to say? I wrote, fate is inescapable, but if you're upper middle class and white, that might kind of be heartwarming. You
I
know?
mean, yeah. I think it wants to be saying that like, oh, like true love is written in the stars, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. Like it wants to say that. Like
Yes.
it's trying to be like, oh yeah, we're definitely saying that, right? And it's like, I don't think you
But there are
are.
Oh,
so
honey.
many movies that say that. It's not the hardest thing to say, but there are
It's
so many movies that do it right. You
Yeah,
know?
so
Or at
much
least
better. Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, like Tale as Old as Time, like the Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. It's like, Sleeping Beauty, True Love Conquers All. Like it's a simple message, but we have to believe these people are in love and
Hmm.
that they get happiness from this love to some degree.
Yes, you fail literally the most obvious first step of a romance. And
Well,
it's,
didn't
yeah.
you say that that Audrey Niffenegger was inspired partially because of all like the shitty relationships
Yeah.
she's had,
And
right?
so to me, this is a story about shitty relationships,
I was
not
gonna
love
say like
conquers all.
It is
the
sort
yeah,
of a bastardization of the book, if that's what she was going for. And then they twisted and turned it into like some schmaltzy romance.
yeah, that's
That is kind
exactly
of
it.
funny.
Because I think that's probably why like I watched the movie and I think I'm like if I don't think about it, I'm blinded by those beats they're trying to play as the Notebook, right? I'm like, oh yeah, and then I feel things at the end. But I don't feel that way about the book, and that's why I keep going back to it, is because it's complex, it's
Yeah.
interesting. Um,
Well, it's
and
like
I've
the
actually
little.
never read, there's like an author's interview at the back, and I've never read it. And
No,
so
you
it's
need
like,
to.
yeah, because I'm like, because I never took the book as like, oh, this is just like a wonderful romance. It's like, this is about a very complex
Yeah.
relationship, especially about like a guy who's pretty shitty,
Yeah.
and like they're in a shitty situation together, and she's like just trying to be normal. And so it's like, yeah,
It's like they Little Mermaided it. So if the Little Mermaid Hans Christian Andersen story is kind of a love conquers all in a tragic way, in that you can sacrifice everything, but you're not going to get what you want and you're going to suffer, and like she dies, like there's a realism, there's a beauty to that kind of story. And then as the animated movie, it ends, they're happy, but A, it's a lot less tragic, but B, it's like it's also fun, and you see that like they like each other, and that he's someone who's worthy of this, when there's a lot to unpack in that movie. But like like you can buy that they're happy at the end.
Mhm.
They changed something to make it a love conquers all. But if the Hans Christian Andersen story, you don't really want her to end up with that prince. So it's like it's kind of like the book is this sad story that has a lot of complexity and shades of gray and things that are interesting to think about. And then this is trying to like two-dimensionalize it. And I think
Yes.
that's why I feel like most people who like the book aren't big fans of the movie, because they're doing two fundamentally different things.
yeah,
But the movie doesn't even succeed. So if you say like I think the Disney movie actually has quite a bit in common with the Hans Christian Andersen story, but if it does something fundamentally different, you'd argue that it succeeds doing it. And this movie doesn't succeed in making us root for this couple.
right.
Definitely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So with all that, was that your fantasy?
God.
So again, I have a really complicated relationship with this movie and the book.
I know,
Um,
because I feel bad because it's something you like, and we're kind of
well,
like this. I
no,
hate
it's
this.
good for, because again, I didn't watch it again for this episode, and I think that's probably for the best, because like I probably would have seen smaller things. I'm like, oh well, what about this? But then I'm like, no, there's like no reason to try to say that, like, to not to defend it necessarily, but like, because this movie is not a successful adaptation, and I don't watch the movie for the same reasons I read the book. Because again, I think this movie, if you don't think about it, I think that it can trick you into thinking that like, oh, this is romantic.
Mhm.
Then you start to think about it and you're like, oh, this is a trap. So yeah, it's like that's definitely not my fantasy. I'll probably go back and watch this movie and
I mean, we
try
own
to
it on
come
Vudu now,
try.
so
True, we do own it. But also to try to like wheel back the conversations that we just had. I
Mhm.
don't know if that'll ever be possible. Um, but
Well,
I'm gonna probably read the book again, because in a couple years I'm gonna be like, ah, that book, it's really interesting. I'm gonna read it. So I'm gonna say no, not my fantasy. This this is honestly just a trap for Rachel McAdams, and I also just don't think that like she's even an interesting character in this.
No.
So no. So like I think I did love this movie at a point, but as I've gotten older, as I started thinking about it more, it's sort of like lost its luster. And now it's like there's not really a lot of luster, because it's we've deconstructed it for good
no,
reason. So um yeah, I'm not gonna mourn over it. It's not a big deal. Uh but
no one
I'm
mourns
gonna
the
make it through
wicked.
also
this.
I will make a plea to people that like, even if you have problems with like aspects of this movie, like especially like the weirdness of him visiting her as a child, like reading the book,
It
it's a
helps,
lot
yeah.
more interesting and complex with all the layers that are added around that. It makes that situation look less weird.
Mm.
Uh, so I suggest reading the book because it's interesting.
So Frankie, you obviously love that movie, but was
Yeah,
And we
that
know it's your favorite movie
sure.
ever.
My top 10. So yeah, I agree with a lot with what Hannah was saying as far as like because the book I still love the book and I actually kind of want to reread it again now, even though I didn't do it before this. But yeah, like I love what you said, Hannah, about the movie tricking you into thinking that it's a romance because it does. Like, if you don't think about it too hard, it could absolutely because it has all the beats of like a regular late 2000s romance. And yeah, if you don't think about it, it absolutely can trick you into thinking that that's just what it is. And it's if you look at it like that, I mean, it's harmless for the most part, but I wouldn't say it's my fantasy. I loved the book because I like reading romance, but I also really love time travel. Back to the Future is actually my favorite movie of all time. So I always love time travel, and that aspect does interest me when done well. So don't like this movie, but I like the book. So I would encourage people to read the book because I think it does help kind of fill in the gaps that are in this movie, things that are glossed over. It helps.
Mhm.
yeah,
More entertaining.
yeah, it's because it's more interesting,
Yeah.
you know. I'm gonna say no, that was not my fantasy. I hate determinism and have since infancy. Me
Come out
and
the womb and be
First
like,
word.
no, I have free will. Thank you
I
very
have
much.
free will, I don't know. I just no. I hate that. And I just believe that we choose things. I don't know. And I think for a good story, you need to choose things. As was it one of the Jenners, this is the year of realizing things. Everyone I know is just realizing things. And that's me in stories. Stories are about choosing things. And I see the thing is usually as much as yes, I have a podcast where I analyze movies, I kind of go into movies like, especially ones I haven't seen before, like, all right, what's this? Like I'm ready to let it happen. And this movie did not charm me. It just didn't like immediately I was like, ooh, and so it wasn't. But
Yeah,
Hannah,
I think I have to say one last thing. I think you watching it as an adult, I think is a really good comparison, especially for me as someone who watched it when I was like, I guess I would have been 14 probably when I watched it. And
mhm.
so it's like I didn't have fully developed concepts of certain things, like I wouldn't have been thinking about that. And so yeah, like you're like instantly like, I cannot be tricked. You can't trick. And so that's really interesting. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's it. That's
What
the
are,
episode.
I feel like we
so
ended on like a saddish note. Like, yeah, it is what it is, but
you know
I mean, it is what it is, you
Lord,
it
I've
is
know.
been
what it
waiting for
is.
you.
It
I'll
happened.
pay.
We can't go back in time and change it because it happened.
Nope.
Maybe Carolina Liar wrote the song because they said about this movie because it saved me from being confused, which is how I felt after watching this movie.
Save
Somebody
me
saved
from
me
being
from being
confused.
confused.
Uh,
Ah, all right. So, Frankie, we appreciate your service. Thank you so much for joining us in this harrowing battle.
I appreciate being asked on. I was very excited and terrified to do this, and I feel like I've conquered something today. I feel accomplished.
You, with your free will, face some
yes.
forces in the
God.
past. Yeah. Where can people find Shoot the Flick and like tell us about your show? Yeah.
So shoot the flick. I do it. We do the podcast mostly on a weekly basis. Myself and my husband Scott, and we introduce each other to new movies. I've shown him things like, funnily enough, The Notebook and A Walk to Remember, and he's shown me things like Rocky and action movies and things of that nature that like we just did Bull Durham. No, not Bull Durham. Field of Dreams, because I'd never
Yeah.
seen that. That was
I saw your memes about that. That was good.
it was interesting to say the least.
It's been so
So
long since I've seen that movie.
it's okay. You don't have to watch it again. Take it for
Yeah.
Just listen to the episode of Shoot the Flick and you got it.
Honestly, I
yeah.
probably will.
But yeah, so we have a lot of fun on there. We have Instagram and Twitter at Shoot the Flick. We are podcasting everywhere pods are casted. So please check us out
Yeah.
every Wednesday.
I just
Every
listened to
Wednesday.
your Grand Budapest Hotel episode.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, so it's a really great discussions. So yeah, check them out, and then and you can find us on Instagram and the TikTok, as Nancy Pelosi would say, tic tac toe, at Not My Fantasy Pod.
Yes. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. Use emojis, use the alphabet, any alphabet that you want to use. The
Yeah.
ancient Greek alphabet, if you want to go there, cool. Let us know what you love about the podcast so that others can find out and find us, so we can find other awesome listeners like you. And if
It
you
would
are on
mean so much,
YouTube,
and we'll read
oh
it
yeah,
on air.
yes, we
We
said we're
will.
gonna do that, and we're gonna do it. If you're watching on YouTube, hi, hello, you can
Smash that like button.
smash the like button, hit the subscribe notification, and hit that bell so you get notified anytime we drop a new episode, which is usually Saturdays, pretty much every
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah, and we have one more stop in our time travel era.
And you know what's interesting is we're going back to the time traveler's wife. It's Rachel McAdams again in About Time this time.
So much better than this. So much better.
Yeah, so we're going to talk more about the philosophy. Again, there's not going to be a lot of science. So we'll be talking more about the philosophical stuff of time travel. Again, we're talking about Rachel McAdams and chemistry, actually having chemistry. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for that as we wrap up Time Travel Month. I get to spend quite a few more months before I have to dive back into the lore eventually if we do any more time travel, because I discovered there are so many time travel movies.
I know some.
There's so
I
many.
think it just goes over my head that I'm like, oh yeah, oh my god, yeah, Deadpool 2, that is a time travel movie. I completely forgot.
So many times we pick a month and we're like, okay, we picked like a lot of the heavy hitters, and then you're like, oh, but what about this? And we didn't do this one,
Yeah.
like.
So we've definitely got more time travel movies we can do in the future, and like we might do one of the sequels for Back to the Future, because I haven't seen any of those. Colin, have you seen any of those sequels?
Haven't
Yeah.
seen. You have to have me back on for one of those.
All right. Well, there you go. So yeah, so definitely tune in next week for the end of time travel month, and then we'll be getting into our next series, which we will tease next week. Or it's not so much of a series as it is just
we have a
couple episodes that are themed together.
Yes. Yeah. A mini series, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tune in next week and we'll see you then.
Bye, listeners.
Bye.
See my scrunchie.